Okay, hey folks. Hey. My bad. Listen, I'm trying to make some stuff happen. So it's been a very, very long week thus far. Let me get in a quick few hellos and then we're gonna just jump into it. Thank you guys for your patience as the world falls apart and I try to keep the content going for you all. All right. Let me see here. What up, Nicole? What up, Black Queen? She said, "What's going on in America? Thought this was supposed to be the land of the free." Man, listen, it ain't been free since we've been here. It might have been free for other people, not really for us. Hello, D. Bradford. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, caught a lot without having to worry about homework. Listen, I commend you, D. Bradford, because you are committed to getting the school work done, right? It is not easy going back to school when you have a 9 to 5. Man, I remember when I was getting my project management. Well, I didn't even do the full program. I did like a program that was like a sorry, I'm just making sure I got this fan on so the state doesn't cook. I did like a program for like a project management certificate program, not even the PMP, and that was hell on earth, right? Let's keep it moving. Let's see, Nikita Clark. Yes, I did watch the In the News episode, but they didn't help much. I need Calvin to voice my inner thoughts on satisfaction. Nikita, what are we talking about? She'll put it in the chat, whatever it is. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving, y'all, just because we're a little bit behind. I don't want to take too long to start. What up, Sarah? I will respond to what you sent me. I just haven't had a minute to. What tea are we drinking tonight? My friend Whitney has made me. Hold on, let me see. I think this is green tea, like green, like a white tea. She'll text me and tell me what it is. It's good though. Thank you. Let's see. Montrez Jones, what up? Piano Kid, what's up? Okay, let's go ahead. I really want to just get started. Few things before I get into my subject matter. I will say, in this era of chaos, this era of uncertainty that many of us feel that we're living through, it is really important that you find community. And when I say community, I mean people that have your best interest in mind. People that you feel safe with, not just physically, but just like emotionally, right? People that you feel that you can build with. We live in such a society of individuals right now. And honestly, this is the worst time to make it all about you and yourself and what only matters to you, right? So if there are those people in your collective that share your same values, that wish you well in the same way that you do for them, this is the time to really lock in, because that's honestly the only way mentally we're going to make it through some of this nonsense that we're bombarded with. I'm just looking at just how extreme the last few months have been, right? Even to the point where even as somebody who's on the content creation side and having to always still talk about all this stuff, even just covering it, I'm just like, and I think for me, the most annoying part is when you spent a good amount of years saying that all this ish would happen if people weren't careful. And now we're in the portion where people weren't careful, right? And like I said, I don't like to be like the I told you so person, so that's not even the energy I have. I'm not about to waste time about who should have did what on November, because at this point we're here. Now we just got to live through whatever's going on and what's the next move. So I don't waste too much time on the blame game at this point, because listen, it is what it is. But the idea of finding community, I feel, is very important. And that also includes the things that you consume. That includes the things that you give your energy to. Social media right now, I don't think people realize there is a large segment of social media, especially on apps like Twitter/X, where a huge portion of the accounts are not even real people. And I'm watching all these folks just go toe to toe with bots and have full on arguments about, and I'm like, y'all, these aren't real people you're arguing with, right? These are accounts that have been fed into the AI system and have learned how to use their white nationalist talking points to get under your skin. So just be careful what you indulge in. That's all. Anyway, I got to move on. Thank you guys for those who sent the birthday wishes. I know I haven't done a live in a month. So yeah, my birthday was on the 1st. It was a very, very, very nice birthday. Had a great time. Ran with the bestie, had a great time with that. And then I spent some time in New York. So that was fun. What else is going on? A few things. Some of my kids, even though I no longer run the community center, the kids are still transitioning. So I got an opportunity to tell some of them, goodbye and good luck as they leave off for college. So that's always really fun. Like I said, the next Comedically Hard-Headed podcast episode will come out next week. And also for the book club, for those who have been waiting, I'll start announcing the I guess the selections that you guys can vote on at the end of the month. Honestly, I'm just trying to enjoy what's left of summer. Summer is my favorite season, and I love the summer. I didn't get to enjoy all of the summer last year because that last summer is when I got sick, right? So the end of July through the beginning of September, I was down bad. So I missed out on the second half of summer. So I said I was going to make up for it this go round. All right. So that's that. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to start with all the heavy stuff. Just get it on out the way. We'll finish light, but I just need to knock some things out here. So let me grab my little notes here. I don't like where I have my notes scattered because I don't like this location, but it's fine. I'll make this work. So like I said, on the last In the News, which you all should watch because I worked very hard on it, I did a review of the Hurricane Katrina docuseries entitled Hurricane Katrina Race Against Time. Now, when I did the In the News episode, I had only seen the first 3 episodes, and I'm so mad at myself because as triggering as the docuseries is, you have no idea how much worse it gets as far as the events taking place by the time you get to episode 4 and episode 5. I was like, oh, I almost feel like I led everybody astray the way I described it. I mean, it's still, I think with my review on In the News, it still paints the picture, but my review is based on the ideals around the storm and the aftermath and the people sitting on the roof. The way it just gets so intense, right? And I'm giving some details in this, so if people don't want to hear about this docuseries because they plan on watching and don't want to spoil, come back in about 7-8 minutes, right? And so here's the things that really got my just snatched me up. The worst thing for me was just the constant vilifying of the people of New Orleans specifically. Now, we know that the storm hit that entire Gulf region, but the documentary kind of centers on what's happening around New Orleans metropolitan area. And so the vilifying of those residents. And there's so many things that as I was watching, I remember reading about or seeing or hearing about. And one of the biggest things that I thought was true as a 17-year-old when all this went down was the narratives and the stories of the sexual assaults that were taking place in the Superdome. The documentary highlights the fact that none of that actually really happened at all. And the way that it was presented, and let me clear this up. The way it was presented to the general public during that time period was that when those lights went out in that Superdome, it was just a cesspool of chaos and viciousness, and so much was going on. And there's all these people that are just out of control, right? That's what was presented. And so to sit and watch and then discover that like none of that happened in the way that it was, not on a macro scale, not in a way where it was just like, it pissed me off so much because I, as a person, was guilty of believing some of that. Because again, this is, like I said in the news episode, this is before social media. This is before you could really clear up narratives. This is when I think the general public still, to an extent, often had a trusting of the news sources, right? You looked at CNN, but back then you did look at something like a CNN as a reputable source, right? You think it like this, and when I say CNN, I'm talking like Larry King CNN, right? You know, you think back to when you watched whatever local news station you watch, especially even if it was like a Sinclair Broadcasting News Network, and you know they would always talk about, oh, so and so news winner of the Edmund R. Murrow Award for overall excellence. So you're thinking all of this is, you know, what it is. And, you know, as the years progressed, you know, your viewpoints start changing. You start understanding things. You learn to not take everything at face value, especially when it comes to like mainstream media. But that was the most disappointing aspect. It's just the way it was so easy to vilify and paint all of these people to just be horrible folks. And so many people bought into it and utilize that as a justification for some of the viewpoints that they have when it comes to those who were on the end result of that. And this is why I say, as much as I hate social media has also been something to kind of quell some of the qualms that people have about a lot of these narratives, because now we live in an era where things can happen in real time and you get the details. Like, look at what's going on with DC, right? I already did a video on that too, if you want to check it out. But look at the narratives on DC. If you were somebody who did not follow social media, if you were somebody who only watched the mainstream media, you would think that right now Washington, D.C. is just out of control, people in the streets blowing up stuff. You walk outside, get blown away in 2 seconds, and it's just this violent space of just dangerousness where people can't even go and see the Washington Monument because you're going to get stabbed in the neck. Like, that's the narrative if you're not careful. However, people that live here have been very vocal on social media, like, hey, look, I'm in DC, I'm walking on the sidewalk and there's people walking poodles, right? And then even in the neighborhoods that tend to get vilified or villainized, like, it's just highlighting how much and how easy it is to get an entire population or collective of people to kind of believe certain narratives that are there. And again, this is not to negate the crime that does exist in DC. And like I said, I'm not even about to go into it because I just did a video on it. Go back and watch that video, please. But it just highlights a lot. But anyway, getting back to Katrina. And so one of the other things that really I remember was just how easy it was for the media to take away the humanity of the people living in New Orleans. And you started hearing terms like refugees, right? Automatically. And this may not sound like a whole lot, but just think about the fact that if you're somebody who consumed a lot of mainstream media in 2005, when you heard the term refugees, you automatically associated it with people who are technically now homeless, but you associate it with people outside of the United States. You associate it with, boom, military operations in Bosnia in 1996. Boom, those people are refugees. Boom, military operations in Yugoslavia and Kosovo. All the people fleeing Yugoslavia to get away from the bombs because we're fighting with Slobodan Milosevic. Boom, those people are refugees. Boom, whatever's happening in Rwanda. Boom, those people are refugees. And so terms like that, what they end up doing is they take the humane aspect out of the conversation and they paint people that are now individuals, put them under a collective umbrella and make general assessments, which makes it easier for the general public to consume media or content that's actually triggering or that's actually disturbing. And so when you use terms like refugees and everything else like that, it doesn't paint the picture of, hey, we just had a city of a few 100,000 people where everybody lost everything and have nowhere to go. We just kind of put it in the refugee bubble. And now you no longer care about their individual stories. You're not going to be concerned about the babies that haven't had any formula for a few days. You're not concerned about people with diabetes that aren't getting their insulin. You're not concerned about the people that needed their dialysis, but there's no dialysis things because there's no power. Everything is out. None of that is a part of the conversation. You put everybody in this blanket statement and kind of push them away. And when you watch this docuseries and you see that the food just never came, that's the wildest part. I do remember that. I do remember being pissed off with that, even to the point where journalists that I never effed with, like Geraldo Rivera, was even out there pissed off. Like, what is going on out here? Why is there no help? And so there's so many things that just really, I think that docuseries really opens a conversation. For me, probably the worst part where I wanted to like jump through. Well, there's a few. Actually, honestly, all episode 4 for me is the one that just had me ready to fight everybody. Like, I'm gonna share an opinion I got a little bit later. I don't want to say it now; it's a little too early in the live. But when they got to that FEMA director, mind you, he was only there for them 2 years. After Katrina, he knew to step down and get up out of there. But that Michael D. Brown, when they're like, "We need you here in the city now because this is happening," and his assistant was like, "Well, he's eating right now. He hasn't had a meal. Y'all are gonna have to wait. You know, he's at a restaurant with his family and wants some quiet time and some time to just." He's been working so hard. Mind you, he's not even in the city. He's not on the ground with the first responders and the overwhelmed ambulance and the overwhelmed people that are trying to do whatever they can do. He is in the comfort of the space and the reality that he gets to benefit from because he wasn't in the space of the city. Talking about he needs to eat. I could have jumped through the TV when I saw that. The sending of the 1,500 police officers, not to go and continue to help the people, because at this point, because now we're talking 3-4 days after the levees have broken, people are still on their roofs, people are still sitting on their roof, haven't had food in however many days. And understand, when you're sitting on a roof with no shade, no trees, it is August going into September in Louisiana. You know, Louisiana is hot till November, right? We're talking just scorching sun, no anything. You can't, there's no water, right? You can't drink the water that's flooding the neighborhood because that's filled with everything under the sun. That's filled with all the oil from the cars that are now submerged. That's filled with all of the sewage. That's filled with all of the toxins and the chemicals and the trash that everything, the fertilizer. You can't drink that water. So you're sitting on a roof dehydrating because there's no shade, no water, no anything. You want your neighbors, God forbid, unfortunately, passing away and dying and so on and so forth. And so they send 1,500 troops in, not to go and get these people off their roofs, but no, we're going to go and stop the looters, which is the thing. Even the term looters goes back to that conversation of refugees. These are terms that, again, take the humanity aspect out of a conversation and more so criminalize the people who are on the receiving end of the nonsense. Here's the thing that I always thought about, even in high school when Katrina happened. when I kept seeing the stories and everybody's like, oh, they're looting. Oh my God, they're in the grocery store looting. The reality is, none of these stores were ever going to resell any of the items that were on the shelves. Why? Because everything was destroyed. You had grocery stores that had no electricity for 3 or 4 days. They're not reselling any of that produce. They're not reselling the milk. They're not reselling the meat. They're not reselling anything. All of that stuff has been exposed to the elements. All of these places were going to get gutted and rebuilt or torn down. And so the idea of somehow putting the idea of property over the livelihood of the people, when again, this is when there still hasn't even been any food delivered. FEMA hasn't even come in yet. The MREs have not arrived. If you don't know what MREs are, meals ready to eat. People in the military, that's what they eat when they're in the field and stuff like that. Not really the best food, but it'll get the job done when you really actually just need to eat. But again, the idea of spending so much time worried about those who were looting and spending so much time worried about those who were committing crime because they were stealing all the big boxes of chips and they were stealing the diapers and stealing. There's nothing to steal at this point. All of these stores that are no longer open and these whole sides of town that are shut down, their purpose of operation has changed. They are not a business at the moment. And so they more so are a resource. And so as the media showed us these images of people who were, wading through this nasty water with bags of food or whatever they're trying to get, the idea of just painting them to be criminals. And there's a scene in there where it's this white woman that was a tourist that just happened to be in town during the hurricane. And she was so mad at the people taking the food out the store. So I can't believe it's like they just took everything. And I'm like, ma'am, you don't even live here. What you can go. like, oh, Lord. And then it just led to the whole conversation of shoot to kill and how the governor was like, yeah, we're going to come in with these looters, shoot to kill. And I'm like, here we go. Now here come the white vigilantes, already trigger happy, looking for a reason to shoot us in the face anyway. And then, of course, we get that. There's the story of people. There were 10 people who were unarmed that were shot and killed in New Orleans, specifically by either white vigilantes or the police, right? Crazy. But they give a story about a man who was targeted, right? There was an area called Algiers that was nearby. The residents of there didn't want the people from New Orleans coming across the bridge to them because they thought they were going to come in and steal. These are like working class white folks. And so they were black folks who were literally targeted. And they give the story about the guy who was killed, not by police, but by some random white folks with their weapons. And then the worst part is you see the footage of the family, specifically the white family, the one that went and killed these people, and they're celebrating. They're wearing this like a badge of honor. Yeah, we had all the teeth in the front missing. We had to do what we had to do. Yeah. I just was like, it's really F white people permanently around here for me. Like, it's just like, there is no leverage with white folks. I'm sorry. Are there some that are decent people that mean well? Sure. Collectively, I'm at a space where all of y'all got to get vetted at this point. I mean, that's kind of how I've been moving anyway since about 2016. But just to see that that's how folks were even moving in 05, I was like, geez. It really just mirrors where we are today, right? 2025 is really not that far off from 2005 when we're talking about the scope and the mindset of how white Americans tend to move collectively. Not much has changed. There's just more power behind it. And to me, that is wild. I just was like, yeah, so definitely check out the series. There's also another series coming out that Wendell Pierce, I want to say produced, that comes out on Netflix, I think, next week. Right. And I get it. For some people, it's kind of like, I don't want to consume trauma. I don't want to consume things that are, things that run up my blood pressure or really affect my mental psyche. But I do want to say it is important that these stories are not erased, especially in this current era where there is an attack on reality. There is an attack on the truth, and there is an attack on just all, the reality of what is history, everything. We're living through it. And so, yeah, I need to take a sip on that. All right, so I'm going to read some comments, and then this next segment kind of connects like three of the topics in this title, and we're just going to kind of go from there. A mess here. All right, so let's see. Thank you, Tyler. Happy belated birthday. Thanks for all the birthday wishes. Yes, I'm 23. Yeah, right. I had about 10 more years and some more years of that. Let's see. Hey, Calvin, I appreciate you because I just can't watch the news anymore these days. I don't even watch the news anymore, to be honest. I kind of just, most of my media consumption is, even though they're under attack, is coming from like NPR, Democracy Now!, Urban View, mainstream news. I will quickly do a skim through of, but they got too much nonsense on their platforms right now. So I'm not really checking for what they got going, right? Or I'll check out different journals and stuff like that. Let's see what's going on with Gladys Knight. Let's talk about it at the end. Y'all keep bringing her up. Let's see. Somebody said, I'm tired of the occupation here. Sounds like you must live in DC. Somebody said the gentrification of DC over the years, and we're going to get to it, right? Somebody said they were abandoned. Yes, that's how I feel about the people in specifically New Orleans and in those different wards. Just there was no sense of urgency. There was no sense of these people matter. It was more of these people are seen as a nuisance. Maybe we'll just let Mother Nature do its thing, and then we'll drag our feet. Like, it makes no sense. It took that many days for the help to finally arrive. And even in the portion where the guy was saying when he was helping evacuate that apartment building and how the helicopters just kept flying past them and going to the wider neighborhoods to rescue people. And it got to the point where the guy had to go and find the white people that lived in the building and put them on the roof. Then the helicopters start coming. I said, see, okay, all right. Anyway, Oh, L Night, I remember that too. Somebody said, I remember looting versus finding food. And that's in reference to, in a lot of the print media, when they often were showing Black people that had food, whatever, they were looters. When it showed the destitute white person doing exactly the same thing, you know, they were finding food. It's just, what a time, what a time, what a time, what a time. Let's see. Okay, I want to keep it going. Somebody says, and what is Marjorie Taylor Greene doing? She and Candace Owens are drinking the same juice. Yeah, I'll get to it. Maybe I'll talk about Candace a little bit later. Marjorie did. Okay. All right. So, I want to start with this article. We're going to try this again. Now, y'all know when we were trying to share last time, I was sitting here reading for 10 minutes and there wasn't nothing on the screen. Ain't nobody told me because I was in the zone. So I want to start with, excuse me, this article we're about to cover here. Oh, wait a minute, wrong thing. I'll share the screen. There we go. All right, so let me pull this up really quick. We'll just share my entire screen. Okay, let's make sure we can see this. All right. Can somebody tell me what they saw? This is not flying. Hold on. I don't like that. That don't look right. Stop here and hold on. We're going to get this right. Okay, let's share a window. There we go. All right. That should work. Just want to make sure this is right. Perfect. Okay, we're in the money, y'all. Okay, let's go through this article and then we're going to talk. All right, now this is coming from Political. White House announces Smithsonian review amid Trump's cultural reckoning. The administration wants the museum system to celebrate American exceptionalism. We definitely talked about that on this channel before, and remove divisive or partisan narratives ahead of the country's 250th anniversary. The White House is planning an extensive review into the Smithsonian Institution to ensure that its exhibitions reflect the administration's view of American history ahead of the country's 250th birthday, a move that comes amid President Donald Trump's broader takeover of the nation's cultural institutions. In a letter sent to Smithsonian Institution Secretary Lonnie Bunch and subsequently posted on the White House website on Tuesday, 3 administration officials outlined areas subject to review and revision in an effort to reflect the unity, progress, and enduring values that define the American story. This initiative aims to ensure alignment with the president's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive or partisan narratives, and they just said the same thing. All right. Restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions. Senior Associate Staff Secretary Lindsay Halligan, Domestic Policy Council Director Vince Haley, and Office of Management and Budget Director Ross Vaught wrote in the letter. Now, what does the Office of Budget and Management have to do with any of this? But whatever. The review aims to adjust not only the museum's public exhibitions, planning, and curation, but also narrative standards and collection use. The move is the latest in a sweeping effort by the Trump administration to overhaul how American history and culture is taught and presented in institutions across the country, from universities to museums to Washington's Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. The letter outlines that within 30 days, 8 Smithsonian museums should select a representative to I think it's liaise with the administration and provide a list of selected materials for review. Within 120 days, the museums will have a set window to institute any changes sought by the administration, replacing divisive or ideologically driven language from unifying historically accurate and constructive descriptions. Still, the administration officials maintain that their goal is not to interfere with the day-to-day operations of curators or staff, but rather to support a broader vision of excellence that highlights historically accurate, uplifting, and inclusive portrayals of American heritage. They want to talk about inclusive and they keep pushing everybody out of everything, whatever. The initial phase of the project will target, of course, the National Museum of American History, National Museum of Natural History, National Museum of African American History and Culture, National Museum of American that's not the name of them. National Museum of the American Indian. That's where the name was different, but whatever. National Air and Space Museum, Smithsonian American Art Museum, National Portrait Gallery, and Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. The administration officials said the museum network should promote the idea of Americanism, the people, principles, and progress that define our nation, in order to renew the Smithsonian's role as the world's leading museum institution. I think that's about, we got the gist. I don't got to read the rest. Okay, so first of all, let me stop my share here. So first of all of this is expected. This is kind of where we've already been. And the thing that I really want to harp on is a quote where it talks about reflect unity, progress, and enduring values that define American history. When they say unity, unity is code for everybody else shutting the F up if you're not white and male centered, right? Everybody else needs to just shut up. And what we're going to do is get rid of any and everything that tarnishes the image of the white conservative American male in this country. Heterosexual as well. That's really what that's all centered around. Like this conversation of unity, that's just kind of like the icing on the cake to make it seem like what we're doing is not as bad as it seems. And you guys know we spent many years criticizing the idea of American exceptionalism. And the critique that I've always had about American exceptionalism is that it's always presented as exceptionalism through the lens of whiteness. It's presented through the scope of everything that's great about America is great because specifically white people did it. And any contribution that comes from any other group of people, if they did contribute something, it's only because white Americans gave them the space to do it, and they couldn't do it without them. The thing that I've always said is, right, when it comes to history, white Americans want nothing to do with oppression, atrocities, or anything else, but let there be some kind of element of progress or some kind of stride that marginalized groups of people in this country have made. Then white Americans want the credit for it. Be like, you wouldn't have been able to do it without us, right? So again, think of like the movie Hidden Figures, where we go and we talk about, I'm acting like I wrote the movie, but when it shows and highlights the plight of those Black women that worked at NASA, how was that movie presented? They just couldn't possibly dare do a movie that just tells the truth without watering it down. And then we get that wonderful scene from Taraji. It's probably the best scene in the movie, but it's not even a real scene. And it's the scene where she's always late and the guy kind of goes in on her, the boss, the white guy, and he's like, where are you? Every time I look, you're not here. Mind you, she drenched, soaking wet because she's been walking in the rain. And she's like, I had to go to the bathroom. But in our building, there's no bathroom for colored people. I got to go all the way across campus to use that bathroom there. And, you know, she goes off and I work day and night like a dog and something, and drinking from a coffee pot, which none of you want to touch. Right. And so they have that scene. And then what happens? White dude is like, oh, we're going to make some changes around here. He gets up, he goes and gets this hammer, and now he's going to take down the whites only sign from the bathroom and show that we are a nation of all Americans, and now this bathroom is unified for everyone. And then the whole narrative shifts from the plight of what they dealt with to him being a hero. And then none of that even happened in real life. You're like, what the hell? And then so it's almost like in the same way you look at a movie like The Help. Now, mind you, I will say these movies are very entertaining until you realize that they're still a crock of bull. And so even in something like The Help, look at how all of the women were painted that were, you know, the domestic workers, right? They were all painted to just be so afraid, nimble, scared. And the only time they had personality was if they were fitting some stereotypes. So, you know, many don't burn chicken, but like everybody is so just unsure. And somehow, what was the girl's name? Sky. I think her name was Skylar. The lady that kind of looks like Lindsay Lohan. The other Lindsay Lohan, the other redheaded lady. That's what she looks like. I forgot her name. But, you know, they paint her character to be the one that just gave everybody the courage to just step up. Because for some reason, all of these domestic workers were scared to anonymously tell stories in a book where there would be no names. right? And so it just painted all of them to be so afraid. And if it weren't for Skylar and her vision and how good of a person she was, and how much of a fighter she was, and how she would fight against the Junior League of Mississippi, and how she would throw away her entire social life to save these Black women who had nothing before, who had no hope, who were just down bad. Scooter, that's her name, not Skylar. Thank you, Maverick, Lex, cuz. You know, and then the movie's presented, and then it took all of the pushing and the courage of Skylar that made all of these Black women see the value in themselves. I'm just like, okay. Same thing with the Jesse Owens movie, right? The fastest man in the world at the time, 1936, won all these Olympic gold medals and everything. But when you watch the movie, what ended up happening? He needed that random old white man to keep encouraging him, and encouraging him. And I'm like, that's a movie I will never watch again. When I got to the part, I was like, I don't know if I can do it. And I'm like, you just have to run. Run! What? There's nothing to think about. But they do that every time, and just paint us to just be so nimble. They did it with the Jackie Robinson film. Jackie Robinson got all this skill and all this talent, but they made the movie about his relationship with the mentor that helped him get through the door. Everything is, we can't do anything without their help. That's how things are always presented. Even that damn Harriet movie with Cynthia that I also did not support, right? Where they made up a whole character, the white guy. And when Harriet almost was caught and almost was done for, what did the white guy say? Just go. Just go. Harriet got a whole gun. She could have shot him. So play with somebody else. Hold on, I gotta take a sip. I ain't finished. I just warmed up. I got a whole bunch to say on that, but damn it. So anyway, getting back to my point, that American exceptionalism conversation is just about shutting up and not messing up the narrative white people want to have for themselves in this country collectively, right? And so we are living through the era of what I call white restoration. They are going back to make everything the way they want it to be. And this is why you're seeing the restorative measures, like putting back up Confederate statues, right? Going back and renaming these military bases after Confederate generals and leaders and soldiers and stuff like that. Going after the school curriculums and changing things, and doing all these random things that make no sense, which brings me to the fact that I feel that this is a page right out of the book of the Daughters of the Confederacy. So can we have like a quick history lesson, right? I've been meaning to do this as an actual pre-made video, but I just have not had the time. So it is what it is. Let's pull up some stats here. So let's get this open. All right, YouTube, give me what I need. All right, so here's our first person, right? So this lady here, right? This is Carolyn Meriwether Goodlet, right? So in 1890, she created the auxiliary of the Confederate Soldiers' Home in 1892, right? And the purpose of this was to start to celebrate those who lost the Civil War, right? You know, she was somebody who was kin to people that died during the Confederate during the Civil War, right? So she kind of believed in the idea of the lost cause and everything. So this was in 1890. And then in 1892, she decided she was going to rename it, the Daughters of the Confederacy. But there was just one problem, ladies and gentlemen. Let me shift here and switch to the other person. So then we had another person by the name of Anna Davenport Rains, right? Anna Davenport Rains was from Georgia, had a similar background as well. Now, the issue was she too had an organization called the Daughters of the Confederacy. But you know how whiteness works. And the two of them, Anna and Carolyn, like, well, hey, girl, look, I got a group too. You got a group. Let's join together. I guess we can. All right, wonderful. So then the next thing that we get is we get a national platform for the Daughters of the Confederation. But it doesn't stop there, because there's more. So then we get to this next person. All right, let me get back to the shirt here. All right, so then we get to the next person. And this is where it gets a little spicy, right? Because again, they love to paint the idea that racism is only with white men. Oh no, their girlfriends and wives got stories for days. Sometimes they were the worst ones, right? Also check out that book, They Were Her Slaves. That's a great one as well. Anyway, getting to my point, I'll just put this right here. Then we get Mildred Lewis Rutherford. Now this is where it gets spicy. She was somebody who really, really hated what happened during the Civil War, because she came from wealth, right? So actually all three of them came from money, but they also saw what happened to the South after the Civil War. They saw what happened during Reconstruction. They all feel some kind of way. But Mildred was one of the angry, spicy ones. She was like, we're going to do something about it. We're not just going to sit here and just have tea and cookies. We need to get, we need to get our hands dirty. And so she begins what you call the movement of highlighting and mainstreaming the idea of the lost cause, right? And so the first thing that she did, again, was boom, let's go after the textbooks, right? Let's go after the textbooks. Let's go after the narratives. If we can start with the children, if we can start with education, mind you, what's always so funny too, by the way, when we talk about public schooling and everything, we didn't even get to public schooling until we got to Reconstruction. And that was, I'm gonna do a separate video on that, but that was because of the actions of Black people who were now freed, who understood that in order for Black people collectively after the Civil War to have any kind of opportunity for success and prosperity, the children would have to be educated. And this is what initially created the idea of public schooling in the United States. They don't give us that credit. But anyway, Mildred now, but anyway, when Mildred is here, there's now some element of public schooling. She goes after the textbooks. Those are the things that matter. Those are the things that we need to go to. So let me get some more stats here. Let me shift to a different tab here. All right. I'm such a millennial. Millennials, we got to sit here and narrate everything we're doing when we're changing the screen. All right. If I can just click to the next one here. All right. So let's go to this stat here. Most of Rutherford's life was dedicated to the propagation of the lost cause, which strives to rewrite the history of the Civil War from the Southern perspective, arguing that states' rights was the cause of the war. Pause. We have done a video on the conversation of states' rights, and please, when you get a chance, go back and check out my video where I did the video of the Lemons case, right? It's on an In the News episode where I'm cussing out Tim Scott. And it's the video where Tim Scott is saying that America was not a racist nation, blah, 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 blah. This video is probably from 2021. But anyway, I say all that to say, in that video, we go down the origins of really what the conversation of states' rights used to be, because actually states' rights used to be the right for a state to not have to participate in the acts of slavery or oppressive policy. But by the time we get to the conversation of the lost cause, the narrative of states' rights shifted to states' rights is the right to not have to abide by what the union is trying to do. And the fuel behind it was going back to the conversation of the election where when we get to that election where Abraham Lincoln wins and all of the Confederate states voted against him, all of the Union states voted for him. Union states won because of the Electoral College, and they shifted it that way and said, that's the conversation of states' rights. Please go back to that video. It goes through a lot of things. It goes into the fact that Black men had the right to vote in places like New Hampshire and a few other states. And then when we also talk about the Lemons case, which was the case where the family was moving from Virginia to Texas. For some reason, they stopped in the state of New York because I think they were going to utilize the river system to get to Texas, got to New York. New York had laws where it stated that if any person was enslaved that was in New York for a certain period or a certain amount of time, they were now free. And so what ended up happening is the Lemons family lost their slaves to the state of New York because New York was like, these people are no longer enslaved to you because they've been here too long. They now have their freedom. And so I might as well just tell the whole story because I'm spoiling the video. But anyway, I'm gonna keep talking anyway. And so in the state of New York, they're like, you can't have these people. But what we can do is, because, of course, Lemons sues, state of New York was like, well, hey, this is what we can do. We'll give you the value of the people that were enslaved, but you're not getting them back. Lemons was like, nope, these people I trained, I made them, be able to do all the things that I wanted. I'm not giving them up. They're mine. And we're going to go back to Texas. And so it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The reason the case never really gets heard is because by then the Civil War kicks off, because around that same time, South Carolina had just seceded from the Union or from the nation. And it goes to blah, 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 blah. Anyway, back to this paragraph. I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox. Okay. Where were we at? So arguing that states' rights was the cause of the war. Slavery was a positive good and secession was lawful. She gave many speeches in defense of the cause, often dressed as a Southern belle while she did so. Remember our conversations about how when it came to the imaging of white women, they were always seen as virtuous and safe and soft. Southern belle, same thing, right? That whole antebellum period that people love to romanticize, right? Paint her to be, subservient and just doing the will of God. And the will of God is to make sure that these Black folks stay enslaved. And the will of God is to make sure that people understand that slavery wasn't that bad. And maybe we should go back to it. That we used to be a proper country, right? One of her speeches was the first speech by a woman to be recorded in the congressional record. From 1899 to 1902, she served as president of the Georgia Division of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, an auxiliary organization of women dedicated to the memorialization of the Southern cause. She was the historian general of the National Organization from 1911 to 1916. She also served as vice president of the Stone Mountain Project, working for the completion of the etching of Confederate generals Robert E. Lee and Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson, along with President Jefferson Davis, on the side of the giant rock. Rutherford was most successful in spreading the lost cause through school textbooks. In 1919, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, along with the United Confederate Veterans and the Sons of the... How many groups y'all got? Shit. The Confederate Veterans united to create a committee to spread the lost cause narrative through textbooks. The committee was dubbed the Rutherford Committee due to her overwhelming influence. The committee published a measuring rod to test textbooks and reference books in schools and colleges and libraries, which was used by Southerners to measure whether a textbook properly promulgated the lost cause. State of Alabama is the worst offender when it comes to that. I was trying to get the video that I was trying to utilize that has somebody turning the pages in that pamphlet and correlating it with the academic requirements for the state of Alabama in early 1900s, but I could not get that video to work on here. So I said, let me just leave it alone. But if I find it, I'll put the link. Anyway, in 1920, The Truths of History was published by the committee though primarily authored by Rutherford herself. The book expanded upon measuring rod tenets and went further to call out textbooks that didn't properly represent the lost cause. It was essentially a blacklist. These two texts would impact the public education, especially in the South, for many decades to come. Hold on, I got one little small part to also read. It's not a whole lot, so sit tight. All right, here we go. And last part, Rutherford also actively worked against women's suffrage in the 19th Amendment. Gee, this almost sounds like the way the 53% always vote. She believes suffrage undermined women's traditional roles in the private sphere. Yes, stay and be subservient or get knocked upside the head by your husband. Although she herself undermined these expectations by being a public speaker and unmarried. In 1927, while recovering from a serious illness, her house burned down, destroying many of her personal papers and belongings, along with her collection of Confederate memorabilia. Oh, so sad, too bad. She passed away the next year on August 15th, 1928. I knew Leo season was a great time period. Anyway, so getting back to my main point. So again, what we're seeing with like the Smithsonian and the idea of kind of changing and retelling the narratives is a page right out of this whole Daughters of the Confederacy book. But it gets further because really the move is, I say, remember the 4 R's, because that's what we're living through right now. Reclaim, rename, retell, and rerun. That's where we're at, right? And this is why you've seen, when we even go back to the conversation of the Daughters of the Confederacy, by the time they were able to do the things that they wanted to do and completed what they were able to do, the influence was in the books. We've already done a video talking about how textbooks are sold to public schools in the United States. The blueprint of how those textbooks are sold, specifically when we're talking like McGraw-Hill, come from that very document that was referenced in what we were reading earlier when we talk about what it was that the Daughters of the Confederacy ended up putting out as like that tentative measurement when it comes to what is real and what isn't. Those same measurements and those same tactics were borrowed and utilized and became the blueprint of how textbooks are sold in America today. I'm not going to go down the McGraw-Hill speech because we've done it a few times. Just Google Calvin Michaels and McGraw-Hill, and one of these 5 or 6 videos where I've had this conversation should pop up, even though YouTube is trying to get me out of here. But anyway, so yeah, we saw it in the books. This is the work that they did. The reason why we have so many Confederate statues all around is because of this group. And one of the things that needs to be understood, a lot of this happened after the 1930s. Right? It wasn't even like the war ended in 1865 and statues were going up all over the South in 1866 and 1867 for people to remember their uncles and dads and brothers. No, people were shamed. They were ashamed that they lost. Didn't want to talk about it. This was one of the things that they were trying to brush under, which is why some of these 3 women and these groups came and said, no, we need to retell the narrative and put it out there. So after the 1930s is when we started seeing the statues going up. After the 1930s is when we saw the reemergence of the Confederate flag become popular again. And it also correlating even with the actions of the Klan, right? This is when we started seeing the streets named after all these people. So we're talking Jefferson Davis Highway for those of you who live in Alexandria, Virginia, and take that all the way into Fairfax County, or also known as Route 1. This is how we started seeing all the roads become named after these different Confederate generals and everybody else like that. This is how the schools started getting those names, the Confederate names. This is all after going in from the 1930s onwards, right? This is when you started seeing the parades, and this is when there were the curriculums, and this is when the narrative of my heritage started to become a whole thing, right? People initially were ashamed about being participants in the Civil War when they lost because they got their asses kicked. And the most shame that really came was because they lost due to the fact that once people who were enslaved were allowed to join the Union Army, that's when they finally won the war. Because without those who were enslaved, the Union would have lost. So when people always try to say, oh no, y'all need to remember that white folks are the reason y'all are even free. No, y'all couldn't even do that right. Y'all were losing. Free people had to come out of the plantations and go out there and start shooting to get the job done, because it was like, we'll just do it ourselves because y'all can't get it done right. Right? So that's the reality. So even when you're talking about, and yes, there were the Jim Browns and people who were abolitionists. But the point that I'm making is that the Union was one step out of the door. It was almost over for them, right? But this is why we get to the spaces where people that are from Oregon who have no lineage, no ties to the Confederacy because their parents came to Ellis Island in 19 whatever from the UK or from Poland, and they still run around latching onto a Confederate flag talking about their heritage, because again, it all goes into that conversation of centering things in whiteness, centering things in the idea of American exceptionalism, centering things in what is not the reality. And that comes again from our 4 R's: reclaim, rename, retell, and rerun. Right. And so when they talk about that whole heritage and it's just an inspiring story of what it is we come from, that's because they bought the Kool-Aid. They drank the Kool-Aid of the 4 R's. Right. So can we kind of just break down these 4 R's? Can we do that? I want to make sure I have my right notes here. OK, so let me all right. So going to these 4 R's, this is how I would break this down. Let's just talk about the reclaiming. Right. The reclaiming, that's the goal. Reclaiming, going back, getting the narrative to shift. And that even models today as well. We're going to correlate this with back then and even now with what we see as far as what I call this white restoration project, or the white renaissance, where we're just going to sit here and lie to y'all. We're going to just make up anything and say whatever we want because we need to restructure the narrative, right? So when we're talking reclaiming, that's the goal. The idea of taking power. Because once you can take power, you have influence. And once you have influence, you can build. And you can also affect the emotions of people. And so that's our reclaim. Okay. Highlighting your goal, taking power, using that power to build influence, using that power to get into the emotional appeals of those who you want to believe what it is that you're proclaiming or taking control of. That's the reclaim. Then there's the rename. In modern times, how do we get that? Look at what they've done. The real history they used to vilify. So this conversation of the 4 R's, I'm going to use from the standpoint of vilifying and flipping the script. So renaming, boom, this is how we got CRT. History that was just the reality, history that was the truth, all of a sudden became weaponized. It goes back to what I said about during the Katrina conversation of blanket terms, where you can start putting everything under an umbrella and then weaponize or paint that umbrella to be something horrible because we're going to rename its purpose. CRT. Most people couldn't tell you what it was or where it was, but they were convinced back in 2022 and 2023 that this is what was being taught to the kindergartners. This is where we get the phrases woke, right? White folks bastardized that term and took it over, and you see woke to the point where now it's in policy, right? Woke. Terms like reverse discrimination, that's kind of one of the terms that was used a bit earlier in the 2000s and in the 90s, right? A way to weaponize against policy that was created initially to help those who had been on marginalized sides of policy. This is how Edward Bloom was able to get away and win a lot of his cases, literally using the same language coming out of the civil rights era and flipping it around in his favor. So those conversations of discrimination, well, that's reverse discrimination. And so when we talk about a lot of the lawsuits that were lost by Black plaintiffs in the 90s and early 2000s when it came to issues around race, specifically if we talk about Black farmers in 1999, again, how did they lose? Because the conversation of trying to prove racism doesn't work in a courthouse. You have to kind of just show hurt and show it through a conversation of lineage and cause and effect. And so when they ran on the idea of Black farmers, the reason why we've lost 14 million of the 15 million acres we have was because of racist policies, so on and so forth. Judges were like, that racism thing doesn't quite work because we're a post-racial society. You can't really prove racism, right? And so in due time, people have learned how to utilize the right language, which is why by the time we get to the Biden administration and they initially sign off on the $4 billion that was supposed to go to disenfranchised and farmers through hardship, right? The conversation was understood that the language had to change, where it wasn't just going to be centered in people were racist, but it's more so centered in, hey, farmers that were left out of the USDA program were left out specifically because of their race. And the group that was left out the most were Black farmers. And because these Black farmers were left out of the USDA programs, they did not receive the same resources to build their farms, which is why a lot of Black farms were never able to transfer or evolve from mom and pop to industry, from mom and pop to assembly line, from mom and pop to corporation. They stayed mom and pop. And in addition to that, because so many United States businesses did not do commerce with farms that were not USDA farms, a lot of these Black farmers were no longer eligible. This affected the revenue for Black farmers. This affected what happened as time progressed, and we came into the spaces of eminent domain, and we came into the spaces of land seizure, and we came into the spaces of the laws that existed around heirs land, and how heirs land had to exist as is. And when we talk about a lot of the land that Black farmers had, when we're talking about those 15 million acres, a lot of it was inherited through heirs land. But because heirs land is not seen as an official document, there were lots of Black farmers who were manipulated, who ended up losing their land, or they weren't able to fight for their land because it wasn't insurable, because it wasn't deemed as an appropriate deed. So we could go all day. But so that's the conversation, right? When we talk about how they utilize our own terms against us, and how the idea had to be, you had to learn how to reword your claim. You had to back it by the idea of cause and effect. And then even when those Black farmers got the $4 billion, which the check was never written, because before the check could be dispersed, who showed up pissed off? The white farmers. They said, oh no, this is reverse discrimination because white farmers, we didn't get anything, when in reality, white farmers got bailed out as a result of the Trump tariffs during the first term, where all these white farmers were going bankrupt. The federal government stepped in and gave them handouts, right? Because again, when we always talk about handouts, they love to paint it and drop it on Black folks, when in reality, the demographic of people who have received the most handouts in this country are white people. That's how they got their housing. That's how they got their education paid for. That's how their businesses, they got the loans for the businesses. Another conversation for another day. But white farmers were like, no, this is reverse discrimination. Why aren't we getting a part of that $4 billion? And the Biden administration is like, that $4 billion is the $4 billion. And it wasn't enough. But Black farmers were not eligible for the bailouts during the Trump administration because, again, they weren't seen as USDA farms. So they weren't eligible for any bailouts. And so as these farms were going bankrupt and everything else, Black farmers had to just figure it out. So the white folks sue. It delays the progress. The money never comes. Now the Black farmers got to sue. Now they're suing the Biden administration. Hey, where's our money? You said we was getting our $4 billion. We already got to split it across everybody. So it won't even be enough for all of us to stay afloat, but where's our money? And so boom, there's the lawsuit. Now they're suing, and it's back and forth. And then finally, when it's all said and done, what do the Black farmers leave with? Half of what initially was for them, $2 billion. But they also have to still split and share this with other farmers that fall under that conversation of being disenfranchised or being a hardship farmer, right? So that also includes other groups of people. So when it was all said and done, white Americans got the double dip from something that wasn't even for them, right? So that's that conversation of rename. So just to stay focused, because I really got on my soapbox, we've reclaimed, right? That's going back to the goal, taking power, using that power to build influence, getting into the emotional appeals of different folks, right? Then there's the idea of renaming what you want to weaponize to make it the bad thing. So that's CRT, that's woke, that's reverse discrimination. Back in the 80s and the 90s, the term was the race card. I'm not going to use the race card today. Use the race card and throw that out to any conversation about any kind of Black plight where Black people are unhappy. So that's reclaim, that's rename. Then you get to the retelling. Because now that we've reclaimed and we've renamed it and we have the power, we need to retell what it really is. This is where PragerU comes in. I'll come back to them in a little bit, but there's PragerU. This is what's happening with the Smithsonian museums right now. We're going to retell what happened in the way that we want to tell it. This is how we're seeing what's happening with our K-12 institutions and how the curriculums are being changed. States like Oklahoma are now utilizing something like PragerU to be in their curriculums. I've done a video on PragerU back in October of 2023. I'm really not trying to be a cocky person, but as this stuff happens, I'm like, damn, we really have talked about everything that's happening. We really have. That's crazy, right? Anyway, back to my point. So again, retelling, right? This goes back to, we're going to go back and rename these military bases what we wanted to name them. They're going to go back to being renamed after these people because these weren't bad people. These were heroes, right? We need to celebrate Nathan Bedford Forrest from the Klan. He's a great person. Let's celebrate him. We put his statue back up there. That's a great thing. He was a leader. He was able to organize and get people to come together, right? All for one cause, right? So there's all of that. That's the statues. And then again, that's our media. I'm going to get to that in a minute because I'm going to drag the hell out of Jillian Michaels with her. Okay, yeah, I'm going to drag her later. But again, conversation. That's the retelling. And then again, that fourth are when we talk about rerun it. Now that you got your program set, run it. This is where you even have that thing like DEI and tearing it down. In order to rerun what the other 3 R's are doing, something like DEI can't be in the way. So we're going to get rid of everybody who we think goes against this image that we've created of ourselves and our exceptionalism and our perfection. So everything that is not white and male-centered is DEI. So fire all these DEI people. Let's go after the universities. Let's go after the universities and attack their programs. So we're going to attack Brown University to the point where Brown is so stupid, they're going to give the Trump administration $50 million and also get rid of their DEI programs. You're going to pay the government, the very government you depend on for your own funding. Stupid as hell, right? This is how you're seeing like the Harvards and the Columbias and all of them going and undoing. Well, Harvard's trying to fight a little bit, but Columbia is the one that's acting like a little punk right now, right? These different schools that are going and cutting their diversity programs and their inclusion programs and programs that were created for all these different groups of people that were not specifically centered around the idea of being white men, right? And so that's what that is. And then in addition, putting loyalists into positions of power in all of these institutions. Look at what he's done with the Kennedy Center. A bunch of idiots that know nothing about arts who are going to be in charge of it because Trump is in charge of the Kennedy Center and he'll pick who's going to be in the Kennedy Center honors, right? Look at what's happening with, institutions of our education. All right, Department of Education is already out the door, but yeah, let's put the wrestling lady in there. She could give 2 F words about education, but put her in there because she's a loyalist to the person that's going to be pushing, what the new narrative is, right? And now we're in this era where once you rerun everything, there's no consequences to going against the grain of what was, which is why now we're seeing, and what I mean by that is, for people that are extremely racist and anti-Black and saturated in white nationalism, this is their time. There is no longer a consequence at the moment for them to spew out all of the horrible things that they want to spew out because now they have power behind them. The 4 R's are working. They got people in their corner. Why do you think all these white folks are coming out of the woodwork with their racist viewpoints? Why do you think Jillian Michaels is on here talking about slavery and got the narrative wrong? Why do you think the guy that was playing Superman and Lois and Clark all of a sudden decided to join ICE? Really, it's because he's an actor that works a gig to gig lifestyle and the money ain't right. So he joined ICE because he needs the money, but he's going to pretend this is for protecting America and blah, 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 blah. But you're watching all these white folks latch on to very racist talking points and have no shame. Think back to that episode of the 1 verse 20 with the I don't know the guy, he's the journalist, but it was the guy with all the white fascists and they were proud of it. And the guy's like, well, would you say you're a fascist? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, nobody has any fear of anything right now because they know that they have the numbers to back them. And they know that they are now backed and protected by a system that allows them to be even more terrible than they were before November of 2024, right? That's the reality. That's the 5 R's. That's how they've worked. And so that's literally what we are living through when you see what is happening with something like the Smithsonian Institution, an institution that has always been seen as prestigious when it comes to the accurate telling of history, mainly because this is coming from people that their entire purpose in life is research and being historians and digging through archives and getting the narrative right. And unfortunately, because the Smithsonian does have a large portion of their funding that comes from the federal government, it goes back to those 4 R's. When you get the power to do whatever, and you're the one signing the checkbooks, you get to dictate what is going to be and what will be said and what will be shared. And it is no secret that one of the main museums that we know they're going after is the African American Museum of History and Culture. They've already removed some exhibits out of there. They've already removed the lunch counter from Greensboro. That was months ago, right? I'm gonna tell you what's going next. That Emmett Till casket will probably be taken out of there. If you've been to that museum, I've done a video on that museum when I went when it first opened. Go back to that video. I told you everything that was in there. Most likely, that interactive activity that's there when you go, if you've been there, there's this interactive activity that places you in the time period where you can kind of pretend that you're in that time period and what would you have done in this situation. You answer the questions. That whole thing is probably going to be up out of there. The whole first 4 floors is probably going to be gone because right now the way that it's being presented is Trump's people are going to have folks literally go through these museums and look at everything and make sure they don't go against the grain of what works with something like American exceptionalism. So when you go to this museum and the first 4 floors are dedicated to slavery, right? And I want people to understand, yes, we know our history does not start with slavery, but the way that slavery is presented in this museum, it presents in a way that highlights that without the impact of slavery in the United States would have never became the powerhouse that it was economically. That's how it's presented, right? They do actually start with, our lineage and how we initially would have been on the continent of Africa, so on and so forth. But a lot of that first segment is centered in slavery. And then the next segment is centered in what happens after slavery, the era of Reconstruction. And then the next segment goes into what you call that nadir period, where it's kind of that period of sharecropping, the period of still in the convict leasing, still in what was left of really bad policy, and it eventually shifts over to Jim Crow. And then eventually, by the time you get to that middle section, that's as you come out of like the civil rights era, and now we're getting to the okay, things are finally aligning, and actually let's look at the contributions that we have everywhere. I'm telling you right now, if Trump and crew are to have their way, the only floor that's going to be open at that museum will be the very top two floors. The floor with the athletes, and they'll probably get rid of some of the athletes because they don't want it to look like we dominate sports. And that whole sports floor will only be for Tiger Woods. They're going to get rid of everybody else, right? They'll probably get rid of the segment that speaks about the Divine Nine because that's too much around organizing. They'll definitely get rid of that entire segment where you can go and actually help to trace your lineage. That will be closed. They'll probably, the very top floor, that's just the music. They'll let us have that. So yeah, that's the Beyonce floor and the Michael Jackson floor. That can probably stay. But the actual elements that matter, like that wall that you see in there that literally details every single slave ship and their missions and how many people enslaved were on the ships and how many didn't make it, those conferences, all that's going to be up out of there, right? The breakdown of what different elements of slavery existed in different regions of the country, where some regions centered on rice, some centered on tobacco, some centered on sugarcane, and even the influence of other revolutions and revolts during the time period of slavery. All that will be up out of there, right? So again, that's the 4 R's. I'm going to pause because I've said a whole lot, and then I want to drag Jillian Michaels. So give me a sec. Let's see what's in our chat here. Okay, by the way, I'm not going to be able to get to every comment because I've been talking for a really long time. Somebody said major media is propaganda these days. It certainly is. Thank you, Baby Love 14. Calvin, you always do a great job with your reporting. God bless you. Yes, God bless all of us. It's a mess right now. Somebody said, you hear how Trump is talking about the unhoused in D.C. as if they're not even human. And I'm going to get to that too. You really got to indulge in things that make you happy. Like I've been on like this very happy trip of life to kind of counterbalance the nonsense. Cause like I said, when all this first started, observe, but don't overindulge, right? Especially if you mentally and internally just do not want that just sitting on your heart all the time. Like I'm telling you, honestly, when this live closes, I go back to my utopia that I've created for myself, right? And that consists of traveling and visiting people and eating all my favorite foods and watching happy things. And hell, I went to go see Freakier Friday just for the nostalgia of remembering that the Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis came out when I was in high school, right? Like, let me go dip away for something happy to laugh at for temporarily, just for that hour and a half, right? Happy things. Anyway, let's see. Somebody said we're only 7 months into the presidency. It don't got to be 7 months if somebody just handles business like the rest of us want, and then we'll be all right, if you know what I mean. But there's that. Emma Stone, that's the lady's name from that I was referencing earlier that I said looks like Lindsay Lohan. Avocado Queen. Hi, Calvin. What would you say to those who argue that many Black kids are adopted into white families because Blacks fail their children and up in the system is still a white savior system? I don't like the idea of saying that we fail our children. I think for any parent that, and this is to not include those who, like for those who may have a substance abuse problem, this is across the board. This is just people in general, not just specifically Black, but everybody, right? When you take out of the conversation those who battle with substance abuse, and you also add, and this is not to make them as like they're not a part of the conversation, but the conversation of like failing their child. I think if anything, a lot of times that's the end result of bad policy, and they're the end result when you're talking people that are trying to pull themselves out of a destitute situation when it comes to resources, and the resources aren't just there, and people have to make hard decisions like, can they make it to this job interview, but there's no childcare, so God, I got to leave my child in the car because I have to do this interview. This is my make or break, because if I don't make my rent in the next month, we're being evicted again. Like, I think it's a little bit different in that space. And then we have the conversation of how CPS sometimes does remove children from households that don't need to be removed. And there's so many layers. Let's table that conversation, but I do want to because Jillian Michaels has a black child. I'll come back to that. Let's table this conversation because I would rather have all my stats and stuff together before I really dive into that, especially because I could really go on that, because y'all know I work with kids. So I when I tell you there's a story, a kid for every story. So we'll come back to that in a different time. So Avocado Queen, please send me a reminder to come back to that conversation, please. Okay. Let's see. Thank you, The Sacred Artist. That's the book I meant to reference. They were her property, not they were her slave or whatever I was saying. That's the book. Let's see. Just a Hobby said, I remember that Georgia history book from 8th grade. Yes, that's the book where they said slavery wasn't. But actually, I always have that quote on my phone. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me just, I'll read the quote, because that one there made my day. I said, y'all just be out here lying. It's called Book of Georgia. Let me see if I can get it. I know I have it in here. Georgia. Is this it? All right, I think I found it. Come on, man. Give me what I'm looking for. It's Book of Georgia. Just give me the thing about the frat, man. Damn. All right, I might have to just, for the sake of time, I might have to just paraphrase. Okay, well, I'll paraphrase because it's somewhere. Actually, wait, I got a folder called Facts. Hold on. Just kidding. I'm Facts. Where's my facts? Facts for later. Boom. Okay, is it in here? I think that's it. That's not it. I'll come back to it later. Anyway, in that Book of Georgia, there's a segment where they talk about slavery, and it's presented like slavery wasn't a bad thing. As a matter of fact, when the sun set, everybody got together and sang songs, and they had a front, and people danced in circles and had a good time. Then, it was like 5 sentences, but the way that it's presented, even the illustration of what's drawn, it looks like life wasn't too bad. As long as you did what you needed to do, everything was great. You were housed, you were fed, and everybody, it was just a great time. Like, somebody, we'll find that. I'll make sure to share that in there next time. But I've referenced that book somewhere at some point too. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, PragerU. Yeah, in October of 2023 is when we talked about it on this channel, and really went through it. I'm gonna come back to it, so I'm gonna save that thought. Let's see. Somebody said they might as well shut it down. So the challenge that I think exists right now, because a lot of people are saying, well, let's put our money behind some of these places and these institutions, which I'm 100% behind. Like, if we could get to a space where, like, even with NPR, the saving grace for NPR is they have so much additional funding that even though Orange Man and the White House and the federal government have pulled funding from NPR will be okay because they have enough money coming in. When it comes to our institutions, I think because Black people in general, people love to say, oh, Black people have $2 trillion in spending power. We don't. We have the $2 trillion, but that's our mortgage. That's our rent. That's grandma's bills. That's medical bills. That's your college debt. That's the kids' daycare. That's credit card debt. It's not $2 trillion for us to just play with. And even if we had the $2 trillion, we collectively, now we have to decide where does this go? Does this all go into pulling our HBCUs out of the nonsense that they're stuck in? And there's over 100 HBCUs. That would drain the funding right then and there if we really funded all of our HBCUs solely as a collective and as a community, and made sure that these HBCUs had the resources that would make them adequate with regard to housing, with regard to the professors getting a competitive salary. A lot of professors that are working in the HBCUs, they do it because they love the mission and they stand behind the idea of collective unity in the element of Blackness, but they're definitely lowballed when it comes to pay in comparison to the PWIs that have these massive endowments, because a lot of these universities, like a Georgetown and some of these Ivy Leagues, hey, the money that they're sitting on is stemmed straight from slavery. So they just got a different kind of money. So it's the conversation of like, do we put all of our money specifically into HBCUs? Do we put it into ensuring that something like this museum in DC is saved? But then the question becomes, well, what about the other museums? What about the lynching museum? And what about the Black Music Museum or the Blacks and Wax Museum in Baltimore? So it's like everything, we don't have the collective wealth to fund all of the things collectively that matter to us at the moment. And now that we're living through this era of the attack on our Black wealth, Okay, these 300,000 Black women that have lost their jobs, right? And even when you're talking about the idea of how people have been chopping down the federal government, like I said, when you take a place like DC, 29% of the federal government, as far as federal government employees living in Washington, DC, are Black, right? And so when you're cutting the FDA and you're cutting the Department of Education and you're getting rid of, the Social Security Administration, and you're getting rid of, the USDA, and you're getting rid of the National Institute. Well, you're not getting rid of it, but they're chopping and laying all these people off. You're laying all these people off agency by agency by agency by agency by agency. It's intentional. They already wanted to privatize these agencies. They already don't want people telling them what to do, but it pisses them off even more because a lot of times when people think of the federal government, the first thing they think of is going into a lot of these offices and seeing too many Black folks, seeing too many Black folks in high positions, too many Black folks in nice suits, too many Black folks that are super educated, too many Black folks that are doing well. And it's like, absolutely not. So please understand that some of this aggression towards the federal government is also aimed in the conversation of anti-Blackness. And people forget that the federal government is all over the entire United States. But when you're talking about those Elons and them, who, again, notice, like I said in that Elon video, all of the agencies he initially targeted first and made sure to gut were the agencies that were all investigating him. So think about when he has to go before these hearings and every single person that's presenting this evidence against him in his business practices are Black women and Black men. I understand it's rooted in something where, they're going to make sure they tear this down. So going back to what I was saying, that conversation of Black people collectively, where do we put our money, right? Because there's so many things that we have to consider, right? Even with education, because the HBCUs, that's just college. But what about our K through 12, right? What about the combat that we're going to have to jump into to ensure that our history is protected and that our kids are not being fed BS? Right? What company do we all get behind? Do we get behind, I think I still have it in the description of my thing. Do we get behind the Black History 365 books? I think that's something that's in the description on all my videos that's still there. Do we get behind them? Do we get behind some of these different organizations or these grassroots organizations? And then it goes to the conversation of even when it comes to like anti-police brutality or conversations of community building or all of the nonprofits that we've started or all these different things, like or even like what we saw with Fearless Fund. Again, where the idea of venture capital, but for Black businesses owned by women, like all these different things, a lot of people would struggle to figure out where do we put our money, because you can't abandon one thing to put it all into the other. We would all think of the idea of, well, let's try to spread it as much as we can, but we don't have enough to spread, unfortunately. And that's the end result of just American policy that has worked against us. And so when people talk about that conversation of the wealth gap, this is when that comes into the conversation. This is when that conversation matters, because again, when it's time to organize collectively and put our money where our mouth is, unfortunately, we're limited. And that's the sad aspect, right? A lot of the nonprofits and the people that are doing the groundwork will shut down without that additional backing, right? Can I tell y'all something that I really don't want to share that's breaking my heart? I had to find out that my very center is possibly closing as of tomorrow, right? I mean, I don't work there anymore, but it's a conversation of what happens with the nonprofit world. Now, again, I ain't no punk, and I'm not one to settle and let nonsense happen. So we're already like figuring out some plan Bs, and I think our plan B actually will work. But it just goes, and it's not just my center. It's like literally that organization. It's literally like 10 different locations spread around that are about to be on the chopping block, and you'll probably see it in the news soon. So like, that's the reality. So no matter how much great work you do, and mind you, if we're talking specifically my center, like I've said before within that organization, that is and was the #1 center in the country for 2017, 2018, 2019, 2021. They didn't count it in 2020. I left in 2022, and even after I left that year, that 6 months that I was after, it still was ranked #1, right? And then, I worked with the next director and helped train and keep them going, and they did it again in 2023, right? And so even with all those accolades, if the money is not there and companies or nonprofits struggle, there is no, what do you pull from? Now, fortunately, like I said, with my center, I think we'll be able to save it just because community partnerships, relationships, knowing who you have leverage with, there are some hopes. And most likely what will end up happening, if we can pull this off the way I want to pull this off, is that it would just be funded at the state level. And then the nonprofit that I also support, that I've referenced on here a few times, would take over the programming which is a very and let me tell you how this works too. The wildest part, it would be the nonprofit that would be the saving grace, would be the nonprofit for those who follow my podcast, the nonprofit that Ava started years later that is centered in focusing on the idea of education for Black youth and making sure kids have their school supplies and stuff. It would be that very nonprofit that would step in and fill in the shoes, because the space is already paid for. The space is already there. The funders that fund the center fund it every year, but it's the company that offers the programming that looks like it's going belly up, and that's the problem. So there's still hope. I don't mean to kill y'all mood, but it's been a long week, okay? Right, it's been a long week. So yeah, but that's the reality of what it is when we're talking about where do you put your money at. So that's the reality of where we are, which is why this is where conversations like reparations and stuff come back into the picture, because there's so much to be said and so much to be done. And this is why when we talk about those 4 R's, that's what's happening. They know that specifically, even when you're talking the wealth gap, we don't have it collectively and tangibly to combat it all at once. And that's why we're being bombarded with so much nonsense. That's why, like, look at what's happening even with education, getting rid of the Pell Grants. They know who benefits the most from Pell Grants. It's us, right? They also know that, again, think about those articles that kept saying the most educated demographic of people in the United States is Black women, right? And we know that within that conversation, it's a bigger, broader picture, because that's inclusive of Black American women, that's inclusive of Black women from the Caribbean, Black women from the continent of Africa, Afro-Latino women. It's one big bubble, but to the white folks, they don't want to hear that. So let's go after education. Let's go after all of these programs that exist and to make things harder for people. So that's the reality of what is. I didn't mean to get on my soapbox, but let's keep going. By the way, we are not going to sit and woe is me about the center, because like I said, we're going to get it taken care of. So I'm not worried about it right now. So we're going to put nothing but good energy around that. And again, it's also a reflection of and somebody just said it. Thank you, Nikita Clark. But it also goes to show how bad the economy is. Reminds me of 2007 before the 2008 recession. And some of it is also conversation around the economy. When the economy crashes, and this goes back to what I said in the 2016 election and the 2020 election, because people had an attitude like, why the F did you vote for Hillary? Why would you vote for Jim Crow Joe? And I specifically said that when Republicans are in power, as somebody who works in the nonprofit sector, we suffer because funding dries up. Economy always crashes. When the economy crashes, people don't donate as much. Companies pull back. And now also in this era of anti-DEI, a center with a bunch of Black kids, that's DEI. We had to restructure where our money goes. So we won't be able to give you the donation this year to keep the lights on. So that's the reality. That's why I say everything is bigger. People have to look at the bigger picture. Right? The way folks was on here whacking me when I was like, in 2020, when it came down to Joe and Orange Man, Joe was definitely not my candidate, but I wasn't fool enough to let Orange Man jump in, even though he's, I guess he did lose in 2020. But yeah, people kind of like to always have these very lazy political takes and then latch on and act like everything does not have a bigger impact. That's the reality of what is, right? Okay, so we're going to keep it going because we have so much to talk about. Thank you, Naji said, make sure to keep, this is such great advice here. Make sure to keep books and PDF files of historical books that cite secondary sources and utilize primary sources curated from researchers. Like one of the things I even did with this YouTube channel is made sure that I downloaded and saved every video that I've ever uploaded, just in case YouTube was like, all right, you're doing too much. It's time for you to go. Right, you go against the YouTube community guidelines, and then before you know it, y'all search for me and can't find me nowhere. Just making sure that all that stuff is documented. But yeah, same thing. Oddly enough, scientists did this in 2016 when Orange Man got in the first time. They started documenting and archiving and saving everything. If you don't think some of these, especially these science institutions that are being whacked, aren't documenting and archiving everything and protecting stuff, they know what's in the air, right? They're not crazy. Anyway, let's see. And Nan said we could also fund scholarships and grants for African Americans to become American African American historians. That's the best way to preserve our history. And even with that, as much as I think that's a great idea, those ideas are being attacked because it goes back to the Edward Bloom conversation, where at this point, anything that he sees that specifically targets us, he says, what about everybody else? That's how Fearless Fund pretty much ended up shutting down. That's kind of almost what spearheaded the affirmative action conversation. But I do think to that part, Nan Nelson, that is a possibility. It's just the conversation of wording. For the longest, we had finally figured out how to get the wording out there that we could do the things that we wanted to do. But remember when we did the live and I read that list of like terms that were being considered as far as what would be banned in like federal agencies and stuff, and terms like disenfranchised, oppressed, marginalized were now included? That was because they caught on to the idea that instead of just saying black or, you know, even like descendants of those who were enslaved, you know, they caught on to the idea and the narrative that, okay, using terms like disenfranchised or using terms like oppressed and stuff, that's what they're using. So now those terms are also being attacked. So we'd have to just be very, 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 very strategic in our wording. But I love that idea. And there's actually people who do that. I have a friend, Erica, I don't know the name of her scholarship. Well, this is actually to help students that want to go to HBCUs. But no, I love that idea of, you know, funding scholarships and grants for people who want to preserve history. I think that's very important. So that's an excellent idea. Like, we now have to get in the era of, rather than spending all day arguing about whose fault it was and why y'all didn't do it, what's the solution? This is why in the beginning of this video I said, now we got to start getting into the space of community, because that's all we got right now, right? It's us on an island. And so everybody, I know everybody feels some kind of way about certain things, and some people don't think it's as bad as it is, and some people think it's this, and well, if you did that, well, she should, and we ain't got time. We don't, right? And like somebody said, it's only been 7 months. What you think another 3 years and 5 months of this would look like, right? Anyway, let's keep going. This has been a very spirited live. Somebody said this is a hot mess. It certainly is. Yes, it is. Aurora said, what we need to do is have lawyers like the NAACP who actively sue people who are being racist. They need to sue that guy that keeps attacking black people and black progress. Yeah, they're talking about Edward Bloom. And you know what's even crazy? The Trump administration is even getting the law firms at this point. Look at some of these law firms that have caved, right? Where they're doing pro bono work for the current Trump administration to go after these very people that are actually actively working to make things better for everybody here. But now they've been deemed as anti-American or DEI this, or, you know, going against the grain of American exceptionalism. Like, it is a wild time, which is why I kept saying before the election, people should understand that we may not always have the opportunity to go back and fix things. And I said that because I always felt like people always moved as if we would always have the opportunity to start over. That's kind of the reality of our politics from probably the 60s onward. No matter what president got in, whether you liked them or not, when the next one came in, it was like restart button, restart. We could just always restart and reset and clean up. This is the first time you're seeing somebody actively just tear the country apart brick by brick, policy by policy, gutting, you know, litigation and ignoring law. And you got the Supreme Court in your corner. I don't know who's getting paid off with what. You got congressmen and women that are moving as if they don't have to worry about another election. So they have no problem latching on to draconian policy and draconian practices and just doing anything and everything under the sun. Where now you're watching with this administration, people be prosecuted. Like, the Department of Justice is now being used as a weapon against the citizens that don't align or agree with the current president, right? And they have so much ish going on that you can hardly keep up. 2 weeks ago, it was, oh, they're going after Barack Obama because he was blah, 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 blah. We already done forgot that because now DC on lockdown, right? And people forgot about that because now it's Gavin Newsom said, all right, buck up, what's good? Y'all want to gerrymander? I'm going to do it too. Like, so there's so much happening. Everybody really can't lock in. Okay, guys, I have so many more things I need to cover. This chat is so good, but damn. Okay, somebody said, Calvin, can we talk about the attack on science, the medical world? As someone who wants to become a biomedical and study diseases and make vaccines and cures. Yeah, look at what's going on with research. Look at the fact that cancer trials have been canceled hell, we could spend all day just talking about the National Institutes of Health. Cancer trials have been canceled. They were getting so close to curing and finding cures for so many things with the whole RNA technology. And mind you, that wasn't something that just started because of the COVID vaccine. They've been doing the RNA things for decades. One of the things that we'll learn in due time, even with AI and even in science and stuff, things that are just now here are things they were working on 10 and 15 years ago, and it's coming in real time. Like that's where we're at. And so a lot of the things that are being painted as, you know, whatever it is, and is being painted as something in the moment that just popped up yesterday, this stuff was thought of 10, 15 years ago, right? But yeah, cancer trials, as far as cures and practices, all that canceled. Sickle cell, canceled. Lupus, canceled. Yeah, attacks on science. And the reason why there's an attack on science is because, again, it goes against those 4 R's. White men recognize that if we follow the science, there are things collectively as a country and as a planet we are going to have to do in order to make things a lot better here. But you don't want a cure for cancer because that messes up the money. That messes up all the money that goes into paying for treatment versus paying for a cure. You don't want to fix the conversation or address climate change because that means our fossil fuel industry would pretty much be insufficient and we would shut it down. But that's billions and trillions of dollars. They're not going to do that. We're not going to talk about, the conversation of air quality and regulation when it comes to zoning and where you can build these factories. And so look at what's happening in Memphis and how you have these whole AI data centers right next to an area that already was affected by terrible air quality. And because the zoning laws have changed, there's a school that's there. And when it showed the number of students that have gone to that school over the years that now have cancer, or the conversation of Cancer Alley in the state of Louisiana, like they're going to fight all this because that's messing up their bottom dollar. And because a lot of this in their mind, they feel that it doesn't affect them and it affects us. They don't care. And even though it will affect a lot of them and their children, a lot of these folks understand that they're going to be dead in 30 years anyway because they're getting up there in age, or they're going to be dead in 10 years. Like somebody like Orange Man doesn't care. He's about to croak soon. You think he gives an F about the planet or what's going to happen to the grandkids or even burying them? He doesn't care. So he's going to get everything he wants in his moment. And then when his time comes, who cares? Because he won't be here anyway. Right. And so or Peter Thiel, that's the guy that's behind JD Vance and all of them. These people are in what they're in specifically for themselves. And they're just all lunatics. OK, we have got to move on. So let's go to this next portion. Let's pray that I'm able to get this clip to work. All right. So let's get this. Let's go to Jillian.
Have you looked at some of the things?
Wait a second. Let's start this clip over. All right. Let's see if I can get this to work. If it doesn't work, I'll just paraphrase what's happening in the video. Please, in the chat, tell me if there is sound, okay?
Have you looked at some of the things that are being
slavery.
reviewed?
Yeah, slavery was a bad thing that we should talk about.
Okay,
like
he's not whitewashing slavery. So
he's not.
He's not. No,
okay,
he's not. And you cannot tie imperialism and racism and slavery to just one race, which is pretty much what every single exhibit does. Well, let's talk about the fact that when you look at
slavery,
let's talk about the fact
slavery in America was.
Do you realize that only less than 2% of white Americans owned slaves?
It was a system of white supremacy.
Do you realize that slavery is thousands of years old?
White people.
Do you know who was the first race to try to end slavery? Well, what's controversial?
I'm very surprised.
This is an extraordinary exercise in historical revisionism.
I'm really surprised.
Do you realize,
Jillian, I'm surprised that you're trying to litigate who was the beneficiary of slavery and
I'm
who
not.
was not.
What I'm trying to tell you is
in the
that
context of American history.
Okay.
In the context of American history, what are you saying is incorrect by saying that it was white people oppressing black people?
Every single thing is like, oh, no, this is all because white people bad. And that's just not the truth. Like, for example, every single exhibit, I have a list of every single one. Like, people migrated from Cuba because white people bad. Not because of past. Yes, no, it's in there. That's what I'm saying. You don't actually know what's in there. Do you know that when you walk in the front door, the first thing you see is the gate?
Okay, we're back, right? Okay, so that's Julian Michaels. So the wildest thing to me, first of all, who are you? What we've seen, and this goes back to those 4 R's again. I'm gonna start referencing the 4 R's a lot on this channel. Is because now the idea again, like we're saying as far as like retelling the narrative and reclaiming it, right? And renaming it and then running with it. Now you're seeing tons of people who are being platformed that have no expertise in what they're talking about. But the one thing and the one commonality that they all have is that their viewpoints are centered in whiteness and through a white gaze. And again, the idea of highlighting and painting the picture of American exceptionalism. Jillian Michaels is a fitness instructor. Her thing was that Biggest Loser show where the people that weighed 400 and 500 pounds would go and have to lose 300 pounds in 2 days, right? And then that's her bailiwick. And so the fact that she's on a platform speaking from an authoritative disposition about slavery, where I'm about to drag her talking points anyway and shut all of that down. But this is where we're at, where, again, they're even confident in the foolery. Jillian Michaels would have never gone on a CNN in 2005 and tried to say this because she wouldn't have a career anymore. That would have been the end of her. It goes to show that as the pendulum swings in whatever direction it's swinging in, a lot of white folks get on code. They get confident in the nonsense. And there's also a lot of people who become very complacent in all of it. That's why even when people keep saying, oh my God, how come nothing is being done about Orange Man or Peter Thiel or the Project 2025 or all these people who are trying to screw things over? Because there's so many people who honestly, they'll do the performative, oh, I'm down with the cause, I'm down with the people, this is bad. But a lot of them will get on code because, like I've said before, the one and only time white people collectively are on the same page in this country is when it's time to be racist. And so now everybody's coming out of the woodworks. Everybody can come out and say how they really, really feel. And I really hope all of you and anybody else who's watching, you really remember how white America moved in these moments. Because what's going to happen, because eventually, and this is not me being an optimist, this is just kind of looking at patterns in history. At some point, stuff will shift. It just does, right? Nothing is pressing. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to shift tomorrow. Hell, it might not shift for 20 years. But when it does, what's going to happen is everybody's going to have selective memory, and it's going to be a repeat of everything that we had to deal with during the last election cycle, where I'll sit here combating everybody in the chat who was trying to tell me it wasn't that bad when Orange Man was in office the first time because I was able to buy a car. Right? So that's what we're going to get to. And so remember how all these people are moving. Remember the businesses that immediately, without even a threat from the White House, started getting rid of their diversity programs, started laying off people, started getting rid of people and closing whole offices and divisions spearheaded by Black folks or folks that were not specifically white men. Remember the institutions of education that erased programs, that erased, entire fellowships, all in the name of complying with the whole anti-DEI thing. Remember the people who got on code right away. Even here for people in DC, where, our police are now federalized to represent the White House. DC MPD is like majority Black police officers. Remember those Black faces who had no problem going and harassing these people in these apartment complexes, talking about they're following Orange Man's orders. Nonsense, right? And the people ain't doing nothing but existing. Remember all that. But anyway, getting back to my point. So we're now in this era or this arena where they will put anybody on a platform as long as they can spew those talking points that, again, go back to those 4 R's of, again, reclaiming, renaming, retelling, and rerunning. And that's why we're seeing so many people who are not experts on race, who are not experts on history, who are not experts on anything, get platformed and get to serve as the authoritative disposition and the authoritative opinion on these things. This is why I really can't get behind something like the 1 verse 20 show, because we have to get out of a habit of platforming people that are agents of chaos. As much as I want to root for Abby Phillip, that's the Black anchor on CNN, I hate her show with a passion, because you're giving all of these people an outlet to spew the talking points that eventually other people buy into, especially if it's something that they already want to believe, whether it's true or not. And again, it just makes the movement greater for those who are trying to destroy the progress that at some point was almost there, right? And so, like I said, the thing I want you to harp on, though, is you notice when she kept saying, I see this and it's, oh, white people bad, white people bad. Remember how we've always talked about that the way that the imaging of humanity in the United States has been presented, it's always been presented as good people and bad people. The good people, of course, are white folks. The bad folks are everybody else. And so because white people collectively individualize and center themselves in structural conversations, everything is centered on their feelings. Everything is centered on how they feel. And this is why when there was the whole CRT thing in 2022, 2023, every time you saw a narrative, it was, oh, CRT teaches white kids to feel bad about themselves. When in reality, CRT is not taught in K through 12. But secondly, CRT is just telling the history of what happened in the past. And if you feel bad about it, that's fine, because you're human. You're supposed to feel bad with the fact that, if people in your ancestry did horrible things, you should feel bad, right? And that feeling bad should motivate you to want to make sure that it never happens again. But folks want this to happen again. So that's the narrative that's kind of put out there, right? And so they censor their feelings and everything. So that idea of good versus bad. And this goes back to, again, even how I say white people have been taught to see themselves as the standard, see themselves as the default. And when you see yourself as the standard, You never have to challenge yourself to evolve. You never have to challenge yourself to learn anything. You never have to challenge yourself to be uncomfortable because you see the world through what makes you comfortable because that's the way it's supposed to be based on how you were taught. That's white America. And that is why there's such an attack on science, on history, on education, on even healthcare and the decline, like, because it would require white Americans to challenge themselves. They recognize and they understand that they are behind the bar. They're behind the starting line when in comparison to other groups of people, because other groups of people who have been marginalized and other groups of people who have never been told they were good enough or who have always had to fight have a different kind of fight in them and a different desire for the things that they want. And so they prioritize understanding all the perspectives of the world. They prioritize making sure that they're not only good at what they do, but they're top tier. If you've never had that kind of hunger because you've always gotten to see yourself as a standard, you want to stay complacent in your mediocrity. You want to stay locked into what you know and you never want to expand because you like it down here. It's cool down here and everybody else is messing it up. So what you do, you go out of your way and try to pull everybody down with you. But not only down with you, but then you try to put them beneath you, right? I have a video that's coming out soon that kind of goes back into, remember we had the floods in Kerr, Texas, right? And then the minute I found out that the people of that town voted against the flood warning system because it was money from the Biden administration and so on and so forth. Okay. But again, people, will be down bad and be happy with it as long as somebody else is beneath them. And that's usually black folks. So this is why, again, when we talk about white America, a lot of them are like, yeah, I don't have anything and I'll continue to vote for the destruction of this country because even if I don't have anything, at least I'm not black. That's how they look at it, right? So there's that. And so what Jillian Michaels is doing is she's fighting to protect the image of whiteness. She's not fighting to tell the truth in history. She's not fighting to make sure that the facts are accurate. She's making sure that she and the people that she values still look good at the end. And there honestly is just no way to make slavery look good, and they hate it. So this is why they go and they start coming up with straw man facts, and they'll find a talking point and run with it, and they'll water down conversations, right? And so that's why she's sitting there with these numbers that she has brought up with this 2% that I'm about to sit here and dissect. So she won't have to, they should have called me because I would have loved to drag her on the show. But yeah, so that's why they sit here and they just spew out anything. There was somebody who literally just responded on my last video about the DC thing. Now, you know, with the DC federal takeover, at the end of the video, I literally go over the crime statistics in DC as of August 12th of 2025, because I utilize the website of the Metropolitan Police Department that they update in real time, as well as the Center for Criminal Justice, something, I forgot the company, right? Literally have the stats on the screen. They're updated in real time telling you. Some guy goes, well, a Google search can easily tell you that crime is up 123%. And so then when I literally find, because I was like, let me see what he's talking about. And the minute I go and find where this quote is, it was like some straw man quote. And then there's documentation that literally refutes that. And it's like, actually, that is inaccurate. And here's why. And again, even if you just pull the numbers from the real-time stats that I had, you can do the calculations in the math, and it'll show you there's no up 123%. If you wanted to highlight a bad year for crime in DC, you could have highlighted 2023, but it certainly wouldn't be 2025. And the highlight for crime in DC in 2023 would have been car thefts, because this is still the era of Kia boys and Hyundai boys. Like when everybody was stealing all them Kias and Hondas, that was the issue. Car theft just skyrocketed, but that wasn't limited to DC. That was nationwide. Anyway, let's talk numbers, right? So Jillian Michaels makes this claim that only 2% of white people own slaves. She also goes into slavery existed for thousands of years, right? So remember how I said, when it comes to history, when they look good, they want all the credit. When they look bad, they want nothing to do with it, and they got a place to blame. So now slavery's been here for thousands of years. We know about the Arab slave trade. We know about all these different slave trades, but we're talking about what's happening here in the United States and how that affects people in 2025, because you're still benefiting from the end result of it. And you're benefiting from the systems that were created as a result of the end of slavery that still weren't there for their purpose to benefit white folks, whether that be sharecropping, whether that be Jim Crow, whether that be redlining, whether that be the covenants to kind of segregate people when it came to housing, whether that be segregation, whether that be job discrimination, whether that be being left out of the New Deal or being left out of the GI Bill. Like, we could be here all day. The zoning laws, even the idea of HOAs. Like, we could be here all day. The practice of the faulty appraisals when it came, like, we'd be here all day. Anyway, let's talk numbers. So let's talk about this 2% of white people that own people that were enslaved. 1850 census, there were 6,184,477 people that lived in states where slavery was legal. Of the people who were enslaved, there were 347,525 people who were slave owners. That's according to the 1850 census. And by the way, this research is coming from a woman named Anne Brown. When we get to 1860, this is getting closer to the Civil War, right? Now we have 393,975 people who own other people. I don't like saying slaves, but they have people that are enslaved that they own, right? 393,975. That is out of 31,180,582 people. So in that document, or in that percentage, that is 1.2%. 1.2% of the population owned other people. But now we need to clear this up some. At the time when we go to 1860, 15 states were what you call slave states. 18 states were what you called free states. Now, when we go into the population of what you call slave states, the thing is, those numbers, when we're talking about the population in 1860, and we're talking about those that would have been in slave states, of those 15, the population was 8,289,782, right? But that also includes the people who were enslaved. So really the numbers, if we're talking about it, hold on, let me clean. I think I'm talking too fast. Let me slow down. So let me backtrack. I gave you the figure 31,183,582. That's the entire population of the United States. So now when we get to the areas where there are the people who are in states that have slavery or have people that are enslaved, now we bring that down. That figure goes down to 8,289,782, right? Those are people who are free. But that number also includes people who are enslaved. So that also includes an additional 393,975 people that own those who are enslaved. We're at a figure of 4.75%. So going back, just giving our numbers, we now have 8.2 million people that are free. And of the 8.2 million people who are free, because we subtracted those who were enslaved, 393,000 of them own somebody, right? So now we're up to 4.75%. Now, let's go into the Confederacy. Confederacy is 11 states, right? So of those Confederacy, because the Confederacy states are who are fighting in the Civil War, right? And so now when we're talking about that population of those who are freed, right? 5.5 million people, 5,582,222 people who were freed. And of that figure, 316,632 people own somebody, right? Now, when we're talking about ownership is just the patriarch or the person that owns the entire property or owns the entire plantation. Families owned other people, even though the only person whose name is on the receipt is the person that's signing the check. So you could have a family of 20 people living on a plantation, and the plantation has however many people. You could have a family of 150 people that had a plantation, but only one person is being claimed as the owner. So when we go according to the 1860 census, in reality, 30.8% of free families own somebody. 30.8% own somebody, which means 1 in 3 people who were white in a Confederate state own somebody. It might have been little Billy who's 12, and Billy doesn't technically own property, but you know what his dad does? His dad owns Mabel, who's on the plantation. And so when we're talking families, yeah, so people love to use this narrative of this 2% and say only 2% of people owned it. But yeah, that 2%, how do we get that 2%? They take the entire population of the United States and then they measure it against the people who are the owners of slaves. But then we recognize that the numbers are going to be skewed because most of the northern states at that point did not really necessarily have slavery. There was some slavery in some states, but it wasn't an entire system of operation by that point. And so the numbers get inflated because really the concentration is the population of states where slavery was their currency. And so when we get from 31 million people down to 8 million people, and then they own, or I'm sorry, of that 8 million people, 393,000 own somebody. And that's just the one individual. That does not include their families. This is when we see the numbers start to shift, because once you incorporate families, children, wives, anybody who's there, This is how we get the 1 in 3. This is how we get the 30.8%. But then the other element is understand that slavery was an ecosystem. It wasn't even just about owning somebody, because again, they also employed other white people to work on these plantations. There was going to be an overseer. There was going to be people who were deputized to make sure that things worked the way that they worked. And so there were so many additional elements. And then when you talk about the businesses that benefited from the revenue that came from slavery and the people that were doing the trade, everybody had a part. And this includes states and states where there are what you call the white citizens that didn't own anybody. They still benefited as well. And so what ends up happening when people love to use numbers and stats is they love to try to do like a very watered down, let me skip all the stuff in the middle and just make a very, very bold statement that could almost technically be true if you take out all of the considerations and do this very, very, very big general statement. But then when you actually get into the weeds, it always gets refuted. And so Jillian Michaels, with her random argument that she Googled or saw on Instagram real quick from some racist account, made it all the way to a national platform, set on across from journalists, put out this number, and then tried to introduce it as new information. But did you know only 2% of white people? And again, it goes back to her trying to protect her image. Because again, my question is, why is she there? Like, what range do you have to even lead this conversation? Your job is to do jumping jacks. But you jumping and jacking all around history, trying to make a narrative that fits what it is you want to believe, right? Crazy. So again, just to clarify and go back to that 2%, she's using the 2% and basing it on a population of 31 million people and saying that of that 31 million people, 393,000 people own somebody, and that's only 2%. But when we take that 31 million people, you have to say, well, of that 31 million, that also includes those who are enslaved. And then that also includes those that are also indentured servants. And so the only people who can technically own people at that point in time were people who were free. Then when you break it up according to region and break it up to the segments of the United States where you had what you call the slave state, that 31 million drops down to 8 million people. And then of that 8 million people, that's where we get the 393,000 people who own somebody. And then that's the 4.75%. But then again, when we talk about the conversation of family, the wife, the grandma, because again, this is not the America where everybody has a single family home and it's just, you know, the nuclear family of mom, dad, maybe 2 kids and a dog. No, this is the era of mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, great grandma, and great grandpa, if they're still alive, since everybody was dying at 52 back in the day, plus the kids, nieces and nephews. My sister died at birth when she was giving, you know, birth to little Billy. So we took little Billy in. And so this is some family home that got everybody and their mama living in it. And so that's a household of 18 people, but on paper it says that only one person owned everybody. When I guarantee you all 18 people had the agency to do whatever they wanted to anybody who was enslaved on these plantations. So that's the reality. So people like a Jillian will sit here and try to spew their narrative. And what's crazy is she will continue to be invited on different platforms, right? Make it make sense. Sometimes I don't even have the words. Like, why are you there? Like, what made you stop drinking your juice and kale water and say, I need to go to CNN and I need to sit there and I need to tell this black lady what really happened to slavery? It's the same thing like when white folks try to do the whole, well, you know, Republicans freed the slaves, you know, the Democrats, they're the ones. Like, it's like when Rand Paul went to Howard back in like 2011, 2012, he did a presentation and he's like, well, I bet you guys didn't know Martin Luther King was a Republican. I bet you didn't know it was the Republican Party that was against slavery. And it's like, so you show up at an HBCU, and I'm not trying to toot and gas at my school because I support all HBCUs, but you show up to one of the top HBCUs in the nation and specifically go to their business school, one of their more competitive, one of the most competitive business schools in the country, always ranked in the top 100 nationwide, normally in the top 30, right? You show up to this competitive business school that's already hard to get into. You talk to a group of people who are in their 3rd and 4th year of undergrad who likely have a great understanding of their own history, because at any HBCU, they're going to make sure you really understand who it is that you are and what you come from and what your history looks like. And the fact that Howard is also a research institution, an R1 institution, or I forgot what ranking it is, but a research institution, where they literally get federal funding to research these things, to go and dig through the archives, to go and find these different documents. You go to this institution and assume that your white ass opinion somehow is something that you can go out there and present as fact and think that these students are just going to eat it and say, oh, wow, never knew that. We're just paying all this overpriced money to come here. And gee, we had no, thank you, Rand Paul. I would have never known. Make it make sense. Okay, let me go to the chat here. I'm gonna put that thin-haired dog lady up on that show. Anyway. And this is why I said, as much as I like Abby Phillip, I hate that show. I just think but a lot of these shows, they're agents of chaos. They serve no purpose. That's why I was always giving so much smoke to something like The Breakfast Club, because I feel like The Breakfast Club opened the Pandora's box for a lot of things. Like, most people didn't even know who RFK was until he did that interview on The Breakfast Club. And that, to me, is the interview that kind of kicked off his political career and gave him an opportunity to actually have a viable shot of doing things. Because literally, The Breakfast Club was one of the first stops he made once he attempted to initially run for president before he pulled out, right? But at that point, now he had an audience, right? And he latched on all these random conspiracy theories, this, that, and third. Somebody who has no medical background, his background is law. And now you've trusted him with the livelihood of everybody's well-being, right? Crazy. They keep platforming all these folks. This is why I'm like, people have to like just not give their energy to things. This is why even like some of the other channels that I am not a fan of, I never really call by name, minus the one person I always got smoked for, just because I'm just like, I don't even want to give them a lane to continue to spread the nonsense they have. And what I have been enjoying in this moment is watching many of the, what I always call the grifters, that proclaim to be pro-Black, claim to be all about the people, but everything that they promote and get behind is centered in white nationalism and anti-Blackness, right? And the majority of their, like I've already said, there's no way you can be this super pro-Black YouTube content creator and more than half of your audience is white. I'm sorry, like something doesn't add up. And if the majority of your audience is white, it tells me everything I need to know. So now I'm watching a lot of those people have a really hard time trying to justify all of this. And so a lot of them are just not talking about any of the things that matter. The giveaway is, let's just do the math here, right? The giveaway is federalize. You got the federalization of DC. You have the attacks on education. You have the attacks on museums. You have the attacks on curriculums. They're erasing Black history out of the books. They've gotten rid of the Pell Grants. They've done whatever they've done with the student loans, and now they're garnishing wages. All these different things that are going to affect Black people collectively. And then when you see what it is that they're talking about, they're still talking about what y'all didn't know about Kamala's past and really how she was in college. What does that have to do with anything? At this point, she lost. That conversation's done. Why are we still on that? Like they give themselves away. So the grifters are having a really, really hard time trying to make sense of a lot of this, because it is just, I think they don't realize how much they bit off and now they look stupid. And so they have to continue to do these random dead and dry and lazy talking points to hold on to whatever audience they have, and they look foolish, which is why I don't give them a platform. Anyway, Eric Williams, what up? He said, the problem isn't Trump, it's his loyalists and the Supreme Court and Congress who won't do their job of upholding the law. Last time they stood tall and did their job. Well, to me, I bring up Trump a lot because he's the face of it, and the energy that he brings makes other people comfortable enough to finally act in the way that they really want to act. So no, it's not just him. Like I said, that Peter Thiel guy's a part of the conversation. The orchestrators of like Project 2025 are a piece of this. Trump is just the guy that's fool enough to be the face of it. And because he's so unstable and all over the place, and at the same time, the way that he makes a lot of racist people feel, it's like it's an entire, just like how I said slavery was an ecosystem, there is an ecosystem in 2025 of white nationalism, and Trump is a part of that. So all of these little things connect, right? So when you're talking about the Supreme Court, like you said, right, we already knew what was going to happen with the Supreme Court as it kept shifting further and further to the right. We saw that happen, especially by the time I knew when RBG died, and I was like, they are going to put somebody in ASAP. Because remember, the argument was at the end of Obama's term, McConnell's like, we're not going to do a Supreme Court nomination this close to the election. The American people, they're concerned about their groceries, right? And so he said all that. And then we fast forward, RBG dies. It's close to an election. There was no, they said, we're going to go ahead and put them right on it, right? And so Amy got right in there, right? So yeah, like we already saw what was going on with Supreme Court. Congress, like I said, a lot of the people in Congress are unserious, especially in the House, very unserious. And then we have a lot of people who are establishment people in Congress, as far as like the House and the Senate, who should have been gone, who are unserious, who don't have any fight in them. Like, I'm sorry, Schumer's time is up. He's got to go. A lot of the people who have been very complacent who still want to be friends with everybody. This is not an era of friends. Like, at this point, I'm not even really a fan of Gavin Newsom, but I'm like, okay, but finally somebody's giving some smoke up in here. Somebody's finally shaking the table, because I don't want to, I'm past the symbolic moments and, you know, we're going to take a symbolic vote to show that on this day we told Trump, no, symbolism don't get us nowhere. We've done videos on symbolism, right? I don't need anything symbolic. Shake the table and get the shit done, or shut up. That's where I'm at, right? Anyway, somebody said I have stupid people fatigue. Me too. I'd be tired. Somebody said, and Calvin just proved why Abby's show is just pointless. You put people out there to spew racist ideas based on their opinions instead of speaking truth. And it just serves no purpose. Like, I have no beef with Abby as a journalist, but I see what's happening with CNN. CNN has already kind of decided they're going to push and be more of a right-wing kind of platform. They've been doing that since 2021. But again, there's no purpose in these platforms, whether it's like a 1 verse 20 or all these different things. You're giving the people a space to build their audience by spewing whatever they spew, right? I've definitely been invited on some channels before with people that have very, 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 very opposing views from mine. And it's like, my livelihood is not for your entertainment. So no, I don't want to go on your little stupid show. Like, no, I don't want to sit here, because one guy's like, yeah, we want to see you explain this. And then they bring up the quote, Black people are only 13% of the population, but make up 50% of the crime. And then I got to be like, okay, you know, that number you want to give, then let's talk about what percentage of people are exonerated that end up being Black. 52% of people exonerated in homicides are Black. But if we want to talk numbers, let's talk about the 74.6% of white men that end up in trouble for child pornography, if we want to do numbers. Play with somebody else, because I'm always on ready. Anyway. Okay. Let's see here. Ms. Jackson said, "I'm 71 years old." Come on for the seniors. We love the we love those who are seasoned that are here with us. I am 71 years old. My 4th grade history book was entitled "No Alabama." Yo, I think that's exactly what I was referencing when I was talking about Rutherford. In it, we were asked to imagine coming downstairs where Mammy prepares breakfast before you go out to greet the darkies. Damn, what kind of stuff was that? See, like. And that would have been normalized. So for Ms. Jackson here, that's in all the books. And then everybody's using those terms like it's just normal, right? Makes me think, this is very, very, very left field. It makes me think of this 7th Heaven episode. You remember Della Reese used to be on that. You know what I mean? When you walk. But anyway, there was an episode where, you know, on not 7th Heaven, Touched by an Angel. I'm sorry. Touched by an Angel. You know how on Touched by an Angel, they were the angels, and they would always appear in these different moments in time. And so there was one time where, actually, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Touched by an Angel. It was this movie called When Women Had Wings. And it was this movie about this white family in the South, and the mom was down bad. You know, she didn't have any money, but she was very, 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 very abusive to her kids, like to her 2 daughters. And then Della Reese was in the movie, because Della Reese was like the Black neighbor that was the nurturing person. And anyway, I say all that to say, there's a scene where there's a little white girl who's in the movie. She's probably like 7 or 8, and she ends up talking to Della Reese, and she's like, "You're the nicest N-word I've ever met," right? It was so normalized for these kind of terminologies. It was, and so Della Reese had to like kind of chew the little girl out in the movie like that. You never say that to me. How, you know? But anyway, I don't know how I got on that. But anyway, Scrolling. Let's see. Somebody said, remember Diamond and Silk? And look what happened with them. One of them ain't even here no more. Another one, the money has dried up because she is no longer of use to Orange Man because he got everything he wanted out of her and didn't even know her name. All right. Oh, thank you. I forgot to bring that up. So going back to Jillian Michaels, and then for her to sit here and spew all this, she has adopted a black child. She has a black little girl, right? And so, again, that idea of paint ourselves to be so good. I went and I got this child probably from Haiti, or I got this child from somewhere because I'm so loving, and look at all of the gracious things that I do. And this even ties back to when we were talking about what was happening with Rutherford and how as she was doing these racist speeches and going all around the country talking about, American values and traditions, she did it in a way where she presented herself to be pious and virtuous and soft, and she's all of woman and all that other blah, 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 blah. It's just generational. There's a pattern that's there, and you see it, right? Every time. It goes back to the boy that we talked about before, the one where they used him in the picture to go hug the cop during the uprisings of 2014, 2015, right? And there's the picture of him with the sign that says free hugs, and he's finally hugging the cop and he's crying. They changed the narrative and everybody's like, oh my God, he's just crying because he just wants peace for everybody and he just is so hurt by the hatred in the world. I'm like, no, the boy is terrified because his adoptive white mothers put him in the cool clothes that they want to dress him up in, like he's a costume, like, oh, look how funky and cool we can be, and then send him out there to spew a message that they wanted to portray, but let him be the face of it because it will be accepted if there's a black child that does it. They force him to go out there and hug these police officers who that same child has just watched beat and club all these protesters and spray with tear gas, and then the boy is crying and boo-hooing, and I specifically did a video on it. You can go back. It's a video I did when I was dragging the mess out of Kylie Jenner when she had that Pepsi commercial. And I specifically talked about that little boy. And what was so crazy was that, and I told the story before, a friend of the family found the video and was so mad. I was like, oh my God, I am so hurt by what you said about our friend. I cannot think of this little boy's name. It's at the tip of my tongue. But the lady's like, I'm so hurt by what you said about so-and-so. He's just a hugger. His parents are the nicest people. And you really have to, and the comment is still there too. You can go look at it. And he's something you don't understand. And I hate that you generalize his parents and he's always been a hugger, blah, 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 blah. There was a whole documentary on that family on Discovery Plus when it was a thing. And his mothers drove him and his siblings off of a cliff and everybody's dead. Play with somebody else. This is the era of discernment. If you don't have any discernment, that you will be a lost puppy. Like, your discernment should be kicking in this era. And I really think that's one of the things that doesn't work collectively with white Americans. They just don't have discernment, which is why a lot of white liberals are having a hard time understanding the space that we're in because they never saw any of this coming, right? They always told us to shut up pretty much with everything that was happening because they were so pressed about trying to look like the good guys or the good people that they always allowed room for nonsense. Oh, we got to hear both sides, or, well, let me play devil's advocate, or, oh, well, wait, now we're attacking freedom of speech, blah, 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 blah. Again, even when they mean well, it's so indoctrinated in them to still maintain a status quo that look how it works, right? Okay, I think we're going to... Let me see. Nene64 said, Calvin, you never say my name when you read my comments. Well, look, I just said your name, Nene. My bad. Nene64 with 2 E's. All right. Let's see. Okay. Jeez. Okay, so I was going to talk about PragerU, but because I'm starting to take a little bit too much time going on my soapbox, I'm going to kind of condense this down a little bit. So now PragerU, did I give an article for that one? I think I did. Let's see here. I just want to double check. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I scroll. Let's see. I don't think I did. Oh, actually, I did. Okay, we'll read this article. We can read. There's nothing wrong with reading. So let me share this really quick. All right, here we go, kids. All right, MSNBC is on my S-word list, but I do want this article right now. Propaganda platform PragerU is primed to capitalize on Trump's PBS cuts. The right-wing media outlet has... Hold on, let me make sure. Can y'all see this first of all? Yes. Okay. The right-wing media outlet... Where am I at? I lost my spot. Has been portrayed as an alternative to PBS children's programming, and it has gotten a boost from the White House. Donald Trump and the GOP's move to slash more than $1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting budget is putting children's educational programming offered through the public broadcasting service at risk, and right-wing indoctrination platforms, in particular PragerU, are in a position to capitalize. Now, mind you, this article is from July 18th, and at this point, it's already been kind of locked in that this is going to start being a thing that is utilized specifically in our K-12 institutions in places in states like Oklahoma. This week, Republican lawmakers inflicted serious damage in their years-long war on Big Bird. With the passage of their Trump-backed rescissions package, in response, the Washington Post raised the legitimate question of whether American children will now be turning to vacuous, I think that's the word, and absurd web content to occupy their time, such as the popular Skibidi toilet series. It's not far-fetched. It's not a far-fetched possibility, but also not the scariest, because if conservatives have their way, more children will be educated with explicitly right-wing propaganda, like that provided by PragerU, the online content mill, whose namesake, Dennis Prager, has admitted his goal is to indoctrinate children with a right-wing ideology. The organization, which has faced backlash for downplaying racist atrocities like chattel slavery and the slaughter of indigenous people, hasn't hidden its desire to overtake PBS as a provider for children's content. Arming parents and educators with the pro-America content they are craving, we're going toe-to-toe with the massive youth media companies like PBS Kids and Disney, PragerU said in its 2022 annual report. PragerU has already entered partnership with these states to produce educational materials. Oklahoma's far-right school superintendent, Ryan Walters, even announced this month that his state will use a new ideology test from PragerU for certification of teachers who come from states with what he called progressive education policies, something he said is necessary to protect students from radical leftist ideology. Oklahoma's 49th in education, by the way. That gives you a sense of how well poised PragerU is in conservative movements' propaganda and indoctrination plans, and the White House has done its part to promote PragerU as its wage war on PBS as well. The Trump administration has partnered with the platform on a Founders Museum exhibit for White House visitors. As tech outlet 404 Media explained, the attraction comes complete with the digital assets like the AI slopified version of John Adams, who has made the regurgitated saying popularized by right-wing influencer and PragerU contributor Ben Shapiro. Okay, let's see. This was a tweet from Seth Coulthard. I have the unfortunate duty to inform you that the White House and Department of Education, as part of Trump's administration's celebration of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, has partnered with PragerU to create an AI stop videos in which we see John Adams say, "Facts do not care about your feelings." Really? Gee, well, what's going on with CRT then? As 404 Media noted, the White House videos conclude with a disclaimer that says, this partnership does not constitute or imply U.S. government or U.S. Department of Education endorsement of PragerU. But that's laughable. As Trump and his allies gut PBS programming and promote the right-wing alternative, the message seems clear. Move over PBS, make way for PragerU. Okay, so one thing that I do want to highlight, going back to even the gutting of PBS, one thing people need to understand is that we have a large portion of people who live in the United States who do not have cable and also do not have streaming services. And there are pockets of the population that still only get the major networks, because some of these people literally are still only getting, again, ABC, CBS, NBC, maybe Fox, and PBS. And so when we talk about programming that our children initially are introduced to, that is pretty much available everywhere, PBS has always served that purpose of educating the public, not just our children, but even the adults, right? PBS has always had these really great documentaries and specials and everything like that. But even in my own experience as a child, like I think I told the story before, I had a TV in my room when I was like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. But it was my dad's TV that he had when he was in the military back in the 80s. So it had like 15 buttons and it didn't have cable. This one, you still had the rabbit ears, right, to get a signal. So my TV only got the major networks. And so as a kid in the morning, if I was trying to watch TV, I could only get what was on those major networks. And so, and I could also get PBS. So I could get Barney. I could get Magic School Bus. I could get Reading Rainbow. I could get... What else was Eureka's Castle on PBS? I can't remember. Y'all remember Eureka's Castle from way back when? I'm showing my age, but yeah. But yeah, a lot of some of those early elements of education I got before I ever started school, and even though my parents sat with me and taught me my letters and taught me how to write my name and stuff like that, those shows introduced you to concepts and elements of education. It's what I call the additional education you get outside of school. And so even once I started going to school, there were other shows that still came on for that age bracket. And then also a lot of their programming centered on the conversation of humanities. So shows like Arthur, and I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day. Like even shows like that centered around the conversation of humanity and understanding how we move as a society amongst each other. And shows like Sesame Street, right, which did an excellent job and still does of highlighting the conversation of diversity. As a kid, I don't think I really understood what race was until maybe I was in 3rd grade. I knew that we were different. I knew we were different colors and stuff. But something like a Sesame Street presented the idea of normalcy of being around other people, right? The idea of, and they would share other people's cultures with you. Like if you've had a child that watched something like Sesame Street, and let's fast forward. Let's say your child has watched Sesame Street from maybe any time between the year 2000 and 2022. Your child has been taught about other kids who have autism. Your child has been taught about kids who have divorced parents. Your child has been taught about kids who have disabilities. Your child has been taught about people who, what was it? I think it was like people who have Down syndrome. Your child has been taught about people who necessarily may not be affluent. Your child has been taught about all these different things. And the purpose is to not paint people as an other, but the purpose is to highlight that everybody has a purpose here and everybody belongs here and everybody deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Those are the values that was on a lot of that programming. That goes against this PragerU stuff. So it's F all that, get that out of here. And when we talk about PragerU, what were the 2 things that we highlighted? We went and we saw what they talked about with slavery. Slavery wasn't that bad. It was a necessary thing that needed to happen so that everybody could do well. And actually the people who were enslaved, it was good for them because it got them out of that crazy place that they were living in. And they came to civilization. And now look how they're thriving. And the other one that we saw was when it was talking about Columbus. And he was talking about how, yeah, we killed all them indigenous people, but we had to do what we needed to do in order to get to where we were. And it is what it is. And it wasn't that bad, right? Now, PragerU is now, and it's not even just in Oklahoma. I want to say there are some districts in Florida that are using it. It's being pushed and utilized as something that needs to be in all K-12 education. And let's understand one thing. PragerU is not a real university. It's not. It is not an academic institution. It is a business with a mission to, again, like they've said, indoctrinate, with the mission to steer that conversation. Again, my 4 R's. Right? Reclaim, rename, retell, rerun. That's what it is. And you start with the kids. You start with the kids and you get into their mindset and get them to see the world how you want them to see it. And it makes it easier for them to receive the other nonsense and information that you want to put out there. That's what that's about. Right? And I've said before, people are always like, oh, you do really good at like retaining information, blah, 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 blah. And I always say that I think the reason I became such a history buff was, again, in those years when I lived in Italy, and we only had one channel, we didn't have advertisements for like products. There were no Cheerio commercials. There was no prescription pill commercials. There was no, there wasn't going to be a Britney Spears Pepsi commercial airing over there. All of the commercials that aired on the one network we had at the time, and this is like 97, 98 before they gave us 4 more channels. Then we got the Spectrum channel and like 3 other channels. But at the time, we only had AFN when we lived on a military base in Italy. Every commercial that came on was either some kind of public health announcement or some kind of educational commercial aimed at teaching children history, right? And so every time you'd watch a show, when they went to commercials, and the cool thing was a lot of the commercials were interactive. So you'd be watching and it would be like, this state will be one of the first states to have one of the new quarters. Remember when they did the 50 quarters with the different states, and that started around 97 and or maybe it started in 98. And, all the states had their own quarter. And like, this state will be one of the first 5 states to have their quarter. Which state is it? And then they would show like 4 states, and it would be like New Jersey, Washington, Oregon, Montana. It would probably sit for like 10 seconds. And then, I'm like trying to guess or whatever. If I had a friend spending the night, like my friend Marcus, not my little brother Marcus, but I had a friend Marcus. Marcus Broughton, where are you, man? I'm trying to find you. Somebody find him for me. But anyway, Yeah, he may have been at the house, and then we'd be like, I'm like, oh, New Jersey, Montana. And then the thing would be like, the answer is New Jersey. Their quarter will be coming out in 1998. Like, those were the kind of things that were on. And so even though it doesn't seem like a big deal, if you're bombarded with this knowledge of information every single day, you start to see education and learning as something fun. It was presented to us as a fun thing. I learned about the potato chip and George Crumb from those random commercials. Here's George Crumb. The guy went to his restaurant, wanted some thin potatoes that were fried. He brings the potatoes. The guy doesn't like them. He sends it back to George Crumb. George Crumb gets an attitude and chops the potatoes. Get on my goddamn nerves. Here, take this. Sends it back out there. The guy still doesn't like it. He sends it back. Okay, you don't like my potato? Oh, I'm gonna give you some potatoes. Cuts the potatoes paper thin, fries them super hard, salts them, sends it back or whatever. And everybody's like, are you sure you want to send that? I don't even know what these are. Yeah, take them since he wanted to be so picky. George Crumb was trying to be petty. His pettiness ended up creating a potato chip, right? Because the guy ate them, was like, y'all gotta try these. And then boom, here we go. There's the potato chip. So now you get the story of the potato chip. But then the next commercial would show you how potato chips are made in the factory. And we literally would see this commercial of how Ruffles were made. Well, it wasn't Ruffles, it was some other company. But like, those things matter. And so understand that what they are doing is literally trying to do exactly what was presented for me as a child, but with a different plight of information and with a different purpose. Literally. I literally learned the 50 states from watching TV as a kid. In those 3 years I lived overseas. I literally learned who all the presidents were. I learned, what were all the countries in Western Europe that we lived in. I learned who a bunch of the Medal of Honor recipients were. I learned, who a lot of the prominent figures in civil rights were. I learned, like, there's so much crap that I learned that was unconscious. It wasn't on purpose. It just happened to be like, this is before cell phones and stuff. So it's not like now, like, you guys watch a TV show and an ad comes on and the first thing you do is start scrolling until you go back to watching your show. You used to actually sit and watch the commercials. This is back in the era when jingles still mattered because people still tuned in, right? Anyway, so with the PragerU nonsense, yeah. And this is why I say, and this goes back to the conversation of teaching, right? We're going to have to get into a space. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not, I'm reading the wrong segment. Let me come back to that. Wrong page. But no, it just goes to show that, again, they are doing any and everything. Because in order to change and help shift the pendulum, you have to attack a generation. And so the move is start with the kids, right? You may not be able to fool somebody like me with no nonsense because I'm just a little too well studied at this point. But it's easy to get somebody who's 12 or 13 who's trying to figure out life. It's easy to get somebody who's 4 or 5 who really is still even just learning social skills and learning how to share, right? So that's where we're at. Let me read a few comments. I think I saw a super chat or two. I want to make sure I have acknowledged everybody. So yeah, a mess. The fact that Sesame Street even got the whack. Mr. Rogers, thank you. I forgot about that one. Less likely. That was a great one. And Mr. Rogers is probably one of those first figures that aimed at teaching children the ideas of fighting racism. The controversy around the time where he had the episode with the mailman and the two of them had their feet together in the tub with the water, right? Which was unheard of at the time. Stuff like that helped to normalize, positive relationships with your neighbor. Let's see. Oh, by the way, this is why I be whacking Candace Owens too, because she definitely is somebody who is a supporter of PragerU while y'all keep trying to act like all of a sudden she's down with us. She is not. Stop falling for it. Now, I will say some people sometimes will have that opinion you do agree with on occasion, because I do. When it comes to Gaza, she and I are on the same page, but that does not negate every other terrible thing that she's done. So yeah, broken clock is still right twice a day, but no. Yeah, she's a PragerU advocate. While y'all sitting here trying to all of a sudden act like she's down with the people. She's not. Don't be fooled just because she's finally getting her hair done. All right. Let's see. Somebody said we couldn't Google it. I don't know what that's about, but I'm guessing that has to do with the fact that this one we still use books. Thank you, Gloria the artist. What up, Julian Steve? Somebody said Gavin Newsom blocked reparations bill for black folks. He certainly did. That's why he's not a hero, but I do see that he, at this point, is one of the few people in a position of power giving some pushback to what's happening. I don't think we should jump in the space of being one issue voters right now. we gotta pause on our one issue because there's a million issues we need to attack at the same time. So multiple things can be true at once. He's no hero to me, but at the moment, somebody's finally doing something. And in the same way where I dissected the conversation on gerrymandering, I think, because I'm not about to do it on here because I literally just spent all that time doing it on that last video for it. This whole gerrymandering, district redrawing thing plays a huge role into what happens when it comes to Congress. And that might be the very first step of shifting some of this power that the people currently don't have, right? So that's where I'm at. But no, he did try it with the reparation stuff. And a lot of them do that. They will sit there and act like they are down. And then when it's finally time to make stuff happen, they flake every time. So, okay. Mary Jaleesa said, "Hey Calvin, I'm going to DC for a conference in mid-September. With everything that's going, do you think that's a bad idea? The location is around K Street. Look, you even gave the location. Like, is that side going to be good? To be honest, like DC is still DC. There are a few clips of National Guard and stuff out here, but DC is still DC. Today, well, let me tell you how my day went. Yesterday, I was going to go to Sankofa because I like to go there, like if I'm preparing for a YouTube video or a live, and do my notes there because they have really good food. They're Black owned. I like the coffee and stuff like that. And I was going to go to Sankofa, but I totally forgot that the Howard students, I think, are moving back on campus this week. And so, I was like, let me not even go over there because there's not going to be no parking. It's going to be all these parents with the trucks and the vans trying to unload their kids' stuff. And let me just not even go. It's going to be crowded over there. So instead, I went to a coffee shop in Penn Quarter, which is kind of like around Gallery Place or the Chinatown area right by the arena. Did that, went and got some food at Clyde's. Then I think I went around Metro Center because I went to buy two shirts. Like I was just walking all around DC, blah, 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 blah. Now that was in Northwest, one of the areas that they're claiming is so out of control, right? That was yesterday. Today, I went I had a dentist appointment. I had to go to the dentist, trying to keep these teeth together, right? Went to the dentist. That was on the other side of town, right? Went to my dentist. That was around Georgetown where they actually released the National Guard, and the National Guard was bored because Georgetown is a very dead area anyway, right? Did that, had some lunch over there. Well, no, actually, I had lunch in Southeast because I ended up going to the, I think I went to the Busboys in Southeast, ate over there. Southeast is one of the reasons that they claim it's so out of control and so dangerous and blah, 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 blah. Did that. I ended up back in Northwest for something else. What was I doing? I think I just grabbed a coffee on one of the coffee shops that was at the Grand Hyatt Hotel, right? And then where did I go after that? Because I started doing my notes for the live. I sat in the lobby at the Grand Hyatt because I had my laptop with me and did that. And then I was gonna attempt to do Sankofa again, but I totally forgot. It's still moving week, so I don't even do it. And so then I ended up going and getting gas. Where did I get gas at? I got gas from the gas station on 14th by U Street, which is another area. Like, I'm saying all this to say there's not anything really going on out here. And as somebody who's lived in DC for 20 years, I have never come on here and told you that I got robbed and beat upside the head and pistol whipped and da-da-da-da-da. DC has its crime, but there's really nothing going on here like that. The residents are minding their business. Now, there are people being harassed and there are people who are being targeted specifically, but I don't think you really would have much to worry about, especially not on K Street, right? You'd be fine. But they're really trying it with how they're trying to paint the city. Yeah, let's see. Somebody said, question, Calvin, will it make a difference if we flip the House or the Senate when the big, beautiful bill starts after midterms? What will happen is we're not going to even feel the effects of that until 2027. So in the event that anything is flipped and Democrats are in power, what's going to happen is exactly what normally happens. Democrats would be in power, but they will get the blame for all of the flaws that exist with the big, beautiful bill because it would have been Republican policy, but it comes into action during a Democrat realm and power, right? So even like with Joe, so many people were like, oh, my taxes during Joe Biden, my taxes are so high, my businesses are suffering. And I'm like, the taxes that you're referencing are the Paul Ryan tax code change, or the Paul Ryan tax bill of 2017 that was passed in 2018 during Trump's administration, but it just didn't go into effect. So when our taxes, especially when people filed and they didn't get the returns that they thought they were going to get in 2022 and 2023, and then they really sucked in 2024, Biden and Kamala got the blame. So it's people are strategic with how this goes. But I don't know. I don't want this to just turn into like Democrat Republican thing, but right now it is a conversation of MAGA versus everybody else. That's just the reality. All right. Okay. I really have to keep going because we'll be here all night, and I still have a few other topics. I will say really quick. I did want to talk about, speaking of DC while we're at it. So with this conversation around the crime and the youth, because I will say there is an issue with juvenile crime in DC. And my reasoning as to why has never changed as to what's happening. One of the critiques I have about this city, and it's not even just DC, it's a lot of cities that are going through the change of gentrification. Like when I moved here in 2006, DC was already going through the change. It was going through like wave number 2 of gentrification, like the second wave, right? And one of the things that has happened here is I've always felt that all of the new development, all of the new this was built around the original residents, but did not include them. And so people got priced out. People were not a part of the conversation. And a lot of the stuff that was gutted and removed and replaced was replaced with things that have no cultural significance. They were replaced with a bunch of gentrified high rises that are built very terribly, right? Think back to when we did in the news when there's a location on Florida and Georgia that always plays go-go music from the loudspeaker. It's just been, when you're driving down Georgia Avenue, or coming across Florida, you're going to always hear that music when you hit that corner. And when they built that high rise called the Shea, a block across the street and at the back of the block from where that building on Florida and Georgia is, and all the white folks moved in and started complaining about the noise, and then eventually got the music to be turned off during the day. And then at the same time, you had the white couple that had went and they were taking their dogs to the Howard campus to relieve themselves. And the thing that I'll say is Howard's campus is not a campus that you can, it's not a shortcut to anything. Like, you don't cut through Howard to get to anything because it's not a shortcut. If you're going to Howard, you're going there on purpose. And so people were offended that all these white folks are going and letting their dogs poop on the yard. Like, the yard at any HBCU is like a place of like sacred, everything, right? And so watching that interview where the white guy was like, well, we're a community, and if you can't be community, move to campus, right? So it's a combination of that, and all of that happened, right? And so I say all that to say that you're getting into the space where people move in, they don't respect the culture, they push people out. We fast forward now to 2025. I personally feel that DC is not a city for youth. It's a city that is expensive, and it's a city that's for adults that have money. There are no third spaces here. There's not a lot of places for youth to go as far, like there's not like a bunch of bowling alleys to go to. You get into Maryland, you can find one. You get into Virginia, you can find one. There's one skate park in Anacostia, but there's not this plethora of skating rinks that kids can go to. I mean, you got the spot in Suitland, that's Temple Hills, Maryland, right off the metro that you can go to, but there's not a lot of spaces for teens to go to in this city. And so at the same time, a lot of what has been developed requires a ton of money. And so to me, when you build and change the face of an entire city and you don't include the people of that city, and the people can tell that this is not for them, right? Because the thing is, and what I've learned with working with kids, especially one of the most important things that we always thought about was everybody wants to feel seen. Everybody wants to feel that they belong to something. When you don't feel that you are a part of something, or you don't feel that you're recognized or you belong to something that matters, then you don't care about whatever that thing is. And so, yes, there is a segment of young people in this area who don't give a F about anything. And it's anything goes, because what else are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? You go to a park, and then the park is so policed, because again, DC is one of the most policed cities in the country. We have dozens of police agencies. You have special police, you have U.S. Park Police, you have U.S. Capitol Police, you have the Metropolitan Police, you have, I'm skipping so many, the Housing Authority has a police department. There's like 12 different police agencies in DC. But anyway, these spaces are so heavily policed. You got the police for the subway station. And it's not to say that police, don't serve a purpose, but when you criminalize the very residents, what do you expect to happen? And then again, there's no third spaces. And it's to the point where people have to accept, because I've seen people say, oh, they just need to build more community centers. I just told you what's going on with mine. But even in that conversation, if you were to build a bunch of community centers right now, those centers are going to benefit the future teens that are coming. Those would work for the kids that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old right now. Those are not going to pull in the kids that are 14, 15, 16, 17, who have already had free reign to do whatever they want around the city. They've had the access to using the subway to going wherever they want. They've had free reign to do what they want. The idea of thinking that you're going to be able to build a building and then bring in kids who are 15 and 16 who have already had the exposure to do whatever they want, to think they're going to be excited to come to some community center and be told that they got to, turn their speakers down, or be told that they're not allowed to do this, or it just doesn't work that way. So even when I look at the numbers for my center, by the time that I transitioned out, my center was 70% teenagers. And it's because my teenagers grew old with me. They were all little kids and just never left. And then if we ever did get new teenagers, it wasn't because a new teenager came off the street, was like, hey, I'm just looking for a place to come to. They normally came because one of my teens that were already there invited their friend. It was like, hey, come, this is really dope, you should come. And then that's how we would keep getting more and more teens, to the point where the company's like, Michael, what about the little kids? And it's like, they're here too. We just have so many teens, they just outnumber my little kids. And so if the argument is build more community centers, great, but understand that those are going to benefit the kids that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old now. And those will be the kids, if you have the right kind of programming, that will stay through their teenagers. But there's a segment of teenagers right now that were left out of the conversation. As the city went through the change and we closed the schools, like I said, in 2007, 21 middle schools were closed in the city of DC and turned into real estate, right? Thanks a lot, Fenty. And so, that mattered. And in a city where a lot of the kids here don't even go to school in their neighborhood, there's not that sense of a centralized community, because you can have one city block with 10 kids and they all go to a different school because of just the zoning. And DC has so many magnet schools and charter schools and private schools, and some kids go to school in Virginia and some go to school in Maryland, and there's all these different things happening. And then some are KIPP Academy kids. So that whole sense of that traditional aspect of a community or neighborhood is already not really the same here, right? So you have that aspect, right? And so you have that group that was kind of silenced and left out. Then we forget that the pandemic happened, right? Lots and lots of changes here, lots of things that were closed, lots of programs that were gutted. Now we're also in this era of this current administration that's stripping and gutting everything and getting rid of things. There's a segment of youth that were forgotten, that were left out, that are now older teenagers, and everybody's mad because they have nothing to do. They move in a way where, again, they feel very invincible. And I think that comes from the fact that right now they're trying to understand what their purpose is, but there aren't a lot of people to guide them into that space. Because again, like I said, with a lot of the community centers closing and the programs being gutted and the nonprofits being cut, there's struggles, which is why I always tell you guys, or if you follow me, and I say like really follow me and dig through all my stuff, I'm always referencing all these different nonprofits. Like DC, I always shout out Guns Down Friday, because I just think they do a great job of being very grassroots in the field. And it's not just about committing the acts of stopping intra-community violence, but also the preventative measures and having community outlets and different things that are there. And so when you have an entire demographic of people who have constantly been told by the world that they're inadequate, how do you expect them to move? And this is why I say there's a conversation of investment, not just investment with money, not just investment with building things, but investment when it comes to relationship, investment when it comes to building. When they really say it takes a village, it really does. The reason my center was able to do so well when there was money, right, is because it wasn't just me and Ava and our people. Like, it was a full community effort, right? Parents were locked in. And if they couldn't be at something, if we had a parent meeting or whatever, the parents knew to send the big brother to whatever meeting I had. If they couldn't send the big brother, they were going to send the auntie that lived down the street, or they were going to send the neighbor down the street who kind of sometimes would watch some of the other kids. Like, you had that aspect. We made partnerships with like so many agencies and companies and nonprofits to kind of make it happen. I did not have a center that had a basketball court or a field for the kids to play football in, or a soccer field, or any of that stuff. But I knew I had a bunch of kids that loved to play sports. So what do? We found people that were those sports coaches where, okay, I can't spearhead and fund a basketball program because we don't have the resources in the space, but I can find somebody who can, and I can find somebody who's willing to come with a van. And if the parents sign off and we get it locked in, they can come and take these 12 kids over to a nearby community center that's further into the other side of the city that has the space to teach them. And even though we don't have an actual official basketball team, guess who's going to be there with a busload of the kids from the center at the game with some signs to cheer them on. And even if they lose, no worries, because we got Capri Suns at the end. Right? You need all of that. And you need that while kids are young, so that as they get older and you invest and you pour into them, that by the time they're teenagers, they know who they are. They know what they're capable of doing. They know what it is that they can offer the world. And so they have vision. They have plans. One of the things that I probably drove my teenagers crazy about, I would not let them have a settled mentality on their life. And when I say settled, that meant for me, you're 15 years old. When I ask you what you want to do, even if you don't know, it's okay. But I better not hear the word just in front of whatever it is that you're going to do. You're not going to tell me, oh, I'm just going to go to this do this route. I'm just going to go to this. No, justice for people my age now who are like, okay, maybe things ain't worked out, so I got to just do this to just make this work. When you're 15, you're supposed to be telling me that you want to go to the moon. You're supposed to be telling me that you want to start a production company and you're going to get Beyonce to sponsor it. And then Blue Ivy's going to be the next big thing because you're going to be her manager and you're going to be a tour director and it's going to do this and this person's going to do that. You're supposed to tell me that you're going to be the next best sportscaster. And after you do your 10 years in the NFL, you're going to run ESPN and then you're going to actually start a private company that will rival ESPN. And then it's going to like, that's the move. You have to kind of put that kind of investment. There's a lot of kids in DC that just never got that, right? And it's because, like I said, so many people were pushed out. And a lot of the people who were pushed out of this city were they were the pillars in the community, but they couldn't afford to stay here no more because as people moved in and the property taxes went up and this went up and that went up and this closed and that closed, it pushed the people who mattered out to the point where the only people that were able to hold on are the ones who, you know, things worked in their favor, but that sense of community isn't there. And as new people continue to move in, so many people move here for their careers, which is great, but people don't move here to latch into community. People don't move here to build in what's already there. Like one of the lessons that my Aunt Queen taught me when I moved here as a college student, because my Aunt Queen is from this area, she said, I want you to get the Howard experience, but I want you to also get the DC experience. Howard is a wonderful institution, but do not lock yourself in just that Howard bubble, because Howard is great. Howard is wonderful, but there's a whole city out here, and some of the best people you're going to meet are people outside of your academic network. Have a parallel network, have your Howard network, but have your people in DC, and then branch out into Maryland, branch out into Virginia. And like, that is kind of how I ended up working in the space that I worked in, where it was like, even though I'm not from this area, I loved everything about this area to the point where I want to be a part, right? And so when you don't have enough of people who really have that kind of investment, yes, juvenile crime is going to go up. Kids that have nothing to do and have all this idle time, things are going to go up. And I will also say we have to do more than just open basketball clinics. And this is not to attack the athletic dreams and the sports. Go for it, because you need to still be physically active. But understand there are pockets of kids who don't want to be athletes. So when you have that kid who has no, like it, when they bring these programs, if the only program in the area is a basketball program and you have a kid that has no interest in sports, they might not even be physically active enough to want to do that. They might not be coordinated. They get embarrassed. Like if it's like somebody like me back in the day, I consider myself like I'd rate myself a C as an athlete, except for track. I was great at track, but like basketball, I'd rate myself a D- because I wasn't coordinated enough. I had a hard time dribbling and trying. And every time I would shoot, the ball always went too far to the right because I was left-handed and put too much power in the left hand, right? So somebody like myself would be turned away from, not even turned away, but just internally turned off from an idea like a basketball program. So if there's nothing else for me, like if I'm a kid that wants to do architecture, which is what I wanted to do as a kid back in the day, I used to build all kinds of stuff with popsicle sticks and crap. If there's nothing for me there, right, there's no investment. Nobody has taken the time to, you know, at least try to find something for me. Then what do you think ends up happening if I have all this free time, right? And I've already watched my neighborhood change. All my neighbors are gone because they got pushed out. They got taxed out. Neighborhoods got whole neighbor, like look at Sursum Corda, right? For those who are in DC, right? Now, yes, Sursum Corda had a lot of things going on back in the day, but it's not even there anymore. What's over there? A high rise, right? So like, it's just, that's the reality. And then I'll also say, even with that, when I think back to when I was a teenager, like how I was saying that once kids had that agency to do what they want, it's really hard to bring them back in. I never was a kid that had an interest in going to any community center, especially by the time I had a car. Like I had a bit more of a privileged experience, but like by the time I got my car, even though I couldn't drive it until my senior year, I had no interest in going to anybody's YMCA or Boys and Girls Club or nothing. Because I'm like, I got a car. I don't want to go in there and be told you're not allowed to cuss and you can't do this. And who wants to do that? Boring. We're going to take our car and I'm going to Tacoma Mall. I'm going to South Center Mall. We're going to go to Ruston Way, right? And then the other thing that I want to say is because things are so expensive now, when I say there's nothing for these kids to do, there's nothing for these kids to do. When I think back to being a teenager, there was so much I could do with $25. Like, thinking back, this is for my people in Washington State, because y'all will know exactly what I'm talking about. There was a movie theater on 84th, and in that kind of parking space or facility where the movie theater was, there was a Ruby Tuesday. Now, mind you, I lived in a small town called Spanaway where there was nothing to do. The only thing in Spanaway was Walmart, okay? Spanaway is not a real city. It's kind of like an incorporated space. It doesn't have a mayor. There's no, well, finally the bus comes there. The bus started coming, I think, right as I was moving to DC. There was a bus that finally came to Spanaway because it could drop you off at the Walmart, okay? Before the Walmart was built, the only thing that was in Spanaway outside of houses was Kmart, right? Even though they turned to Super K, we were making it real big then. Kmart, the pet store, this Mexican restaurant called Hidalgo, Dairy Queen, and mind you, this is all in one shopping center, and this place called Fashion Bug. That was Spanaway. The rest was all houses, right? And so you had to get out of Spanaway to find things to do. So you needed to go to Lakewood, you needed to go to Tacoma if you wanted something to do. So I say all that to say, by the time I got to those teenage years, when we wanted to do something, if we weren't just hanging out at each other's houses, then okay, with that $25, and normally that was probably my lunch money, but I was like, let me just, I'll just take my lunch to school. But my mom did give me some lunch money, so I'll use this for my outing. We would go to the movie theater, and maybe the movie theater sold out or we're waiting for our show. So instead, we go to that Ruby Tuesday back in 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006. You could get a bacon cheeseburger meal for $8.99, and that included the fries. And then you add the drink, which might have been like $1.99. And normally I'm a tea person. I'd always just get the tea and just add some sweetener because they did not do sweet tea on the West Coast like that until years later, unless you're in LA or in the Bay, right? And so, boom, I've spent maybe $11 plus the tip because, and this is tipping culture was a bit different then. So they wouldn't eyeball you for giving a tip of like $1.50 off of a $11 or $12 bill, right? So I still have money left over. Boom, I can still pay for the movies, right? So now we're going to go. We've all eaten. We've laughed, had us a great time. We're just going to walk across the street and we're going to go watch You Got Served. And then when it's all said and done, probably don't have enough for popcorn. But if three of us put our money together, we can probably get one big popcorn to share. And so, boom, there you have it. You had 5 or 6 hours of hanging out with your friends for $25. There's nothing these kids can do out here for $25. Not a single thing, right? There's not even any places to go. So that's just the reality where, again, when you don't invest in the people because you've made it all about the adults and what they want and what they have and so on and so forth, of course, these kids are going to move the way that they move, right? And please understand, there is no sense of community with everyone that's moved here. Like I've already told you the numbers. Only 11% of white families that live in DC have their kids going to high school in DC, right? Understand, as they pull their kids out of these schools, those tax dollars go with them. And those tax dollars go to where, so these people are sending their kids to school in Virginia at Thomas Jefferson because it's like a math STEM high school, or they're sending their kids to DeMatha in Maryland. Like they're sending their kids to other schools. And so when we're talking about DC's public school system, the very people who have come in, who came for the opportunity, as they started hoarding different resources, they took the opportunities from people that already lived here. And so it's a lot. There's that. I'm gonna pause. I did not mean to talk that long about that, but I got in my zone. Sorry. But anyway, okay, let me read a few comments and then we're gonna keep it going. I'm gonna actually start winding down a little bit. I only got 2 more pages left. So we've gone through 8 pages so far. I only got 2 more. So we're almost there. Right. Okay. Somebody said, they banned the book I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which is silly. We read that in 8th grade. And mind you, I went to a white school. We even read that. Somebody said let me see. Let's see. Somebody said, Calvin, I can see you being a reporter on TV. They'd fire me because I'm not good with teleprompters. I don't think people realize I don't use scripts. Well, I mean, it's obvious here, but on the pre-made video, so like if I do like a So What Happened or an In the News or a music talk, there's no script. I literally just have these pages with like a bullet point or two that I remember, and then we present on that. So I'm not good with a teleprompter because I'm so busy always wanting to go off script and say other tidbits that come to my head as I'm reading. So that would never work. But yeah. Anyway, and thank you, Renette. It's an issue with juvenile crime everywhere, it seems. It's picked up in the last year out in Seattle. It's everywhere. I just personally feel that there is a forgotten demographic of youth who have been left out of the picture. And I think that has played a role where you have a whole segment of kids who are trying to figure out who the F they are. And the world is not giving them the grace to make those kind of mistakes. I mean, that's why I was saying, especially for parents in DC, please tap in with your kids. This is not the time for them to try to see how invincible they are, especially with this federal takeover like that. They're waiting to make an example out of somebody. So please lock in with your kids, right? Excuse me. Somebody said, Avocado Queen, if/when things get really bad here, would you ever consider leaving, and is your passport current? My passport is current. I just came from Jamaica. I have no desire to leave the United States, though. Like, it's just never been a thought. And the main reason is because I always wonder, like, I would still need that cohort and that sense of community and that Black space that exists. And those spaces are there, but I just feel like no matter where you go, the problems are still going to be there. And because the United States still has such an influence, whether voluntary or not, around the world, you would still succumb to the nonsense of the United States, right? So I personally have never had an interest in living anywhere. Now I could see myself doing the dual citizen thing and like maybe living in two places, but I've never had the desire to like pack up and go and just never come back. But I don't know, everybody, and I don't think there's anything wrong with people who want to do that. You know, at this point, everybody needs to do what is going to work for them. If I were to leave the United States, it would be because at this point there was just no hope, and that it was now a conversation of life and death. That's when I would probably go. I did see that, Alan Lewis, and I don't follow Lil Yachty, so I tuned it right on out. He's asking, did you hear about the rapper Lil Yachty previewing a new song with a George Floyd lyric, put my knee up on her neck, I went George Floyd. Yeah, I did see that, and I have nothing to say on that. Let's see. And by the way, because I know somebody's going to be a smart aleck and say, what do you mean the kids have nothing to do? All the free museums that are in DC? If you live in DC, you've been to these museums a million times. Even thinking back to my center, in those years where we didn't have a lot of money to do big field trips, where do you think the kids always went? We went to every Smithsonian because they were all free. And it was to the point where you'd be on the bus and like, all right, we're going to the Museum of Natural History. And the kids were like, again? Yes, again. You listen, just because you didn't came to summer camp 3 years in a row, these are the field trips until we got some money, right? So, yeah, there's that. Okay, I got to keep going. As far as the conversation around those who are unhoused, I talked about it on the last video, but again, that's one of the things that Orange Man is trying to do as well. Like as far as dumping and getting rid of the unhoused, and specifically in DC, they were saying, well, the two options that they're going to give people who they snatch up off the street is that you go to the shelter for rehabilitation or you go to the mental health place. And I need people to understand that every person who is what you consider homeless, they are not all drug addicts or deal with addiction, and they're not all people who have mental health issues. Like we said before, there's an entire population of people who work. Nearly half the people who are in shelters right now have jobs, whether it's full-time or part-time, right? And the 43% of people, let me make sure I have the quote right. I still have it in my phone. I'll just read the quote. I literally just said this on my last video, so just go see that one too. I'm trying to make more pre-made content and not do as many lives, because I was noticing that I think I do a better job on the pre-made versus the live, because the live is very unorthodox. Okay, again, according to the study from the University of Chicago, and this is a 2021 study, 53% of people living in homeless shelters and 40% of people who are unsheltered, meaning they're not in a shelter, are employed, whether it be full-time or part-time. And that's a stat coming from between 2011 and 2018. And so again, this idea of trying to paint everybody to be you know, having addiction issues or having mental health issues, and that's why they're homeless. No, again, the world has gotten to a space where it's so expensive for everybody, where people who actually have jobs literally have to go back and do whatever it is that they can do, right? And that's an experience, even again, working with the center. I had kids who were in shelters, right? Where, you know, mom gets evicted. Now they're in a shelter. The shelter is nowhere near their school. They have no way to get to the school. And so they're missing school. So you go to the school and you say, hey, I'm trying to collect the homework for this kid because blah, 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 blah. And then the school tells you, well, your name is not on the list to release anything, so I can't give you anything. So now you got to go back. You got to go find mom, who's at the shelter, but mom's not at the shelter because mom is trying to find a new job, or mom is trying to find an opportunity. And so the kid is there, but you need mom, because you need mom to call the school and to sign a thing so that I can go to the school and get the homework, because mom has no way to get to the school to get the homework because mom doesn't have a car, right? That's the reality. And even like when I was a student at Howard, you know how many people we went to class with that didn't have a permanent address back home to mail things to, right? But, you know, fortunately, they had a scholarship or something to come for undergrad, and literally their dorm was the first time they had a steady place to stay. I don't think people realize just how down bad people in the United States are. Everybody in this country, everybody's so rich here. Everybody's rich. Don't go on Twitter, right? Because on Twitter, $400 ain't enough for a first date. I don't know what kind of world some of y'all are living in, right? Other thing I was going to jump into, I kind of talked about it already, so I'm going to skip it. But I was going to highlight what was going on with Brown and UCLA. We kind of talked about it already. And again, this is, again, when we talk about those 4 R's, the fact that there's an attack on public education, now the colleges are being attacked and getting rid of programs. We've already covered it, so I'm going to skip past it, but wild and crazy. I want to make sure I got everything. Really quick, like I said, I've already done the video on the Texas gerrymandering, and I went very in-depth in how we correlated it and tied it to what happens with census, what happens with gerrymandering, how it all ties to power in the House, how it all ties to the resources that are allocated to the people. Please watch the last in the news for my full thoughts on everything happening with Texas. But I will say it will be interesting to see what happens with the state of California. Gavin Newsom has already said, since Texas is still in ABS, and at this point, the Texas State Senate, not the Senate as far as like, you know, Mitch McConnell and crew, but the Texas State Senate, which again, I talked about that in the video. They've already passed the new redistricting bill in the Senate. It has not passed in the State House yet because, you know, you still have the Democrats they're returning back to the area at this point. At some point, they're going to eventually have to vote and pass this thing. They don't want to, but it's going to happen. So as a response, state of California is like, well, we're going to redraw our districts. And if they're successful, this will counterbalance the 5 new districts that Texas tried to put in. This actually will give power to Democrats in the House at the federal level, which goes back to the question that somebody asked, saying, would this make things a lot better? And so going back to California, they have a special election on November 4th that will tackle all of this. We will see how that unfolds, right? But like I said, it's about time that people start fighting back. The thing that I keep saying is Americans aren't mad enough yet. They're not. I think we're mad enough, but I think a lot of Americans are not mad enough about anything. And I'm seeing it just in all of the conversations where I keep seeing all of these people who now regret their vote and, oh, I didn't vote for this, and oh, I didn't know I'd be affected, and this is white and the Latino community, so on and so forth. But I still keep hearing a narrative that sounds like in the event that these people would get what they specifically want, they wouldn't care about the bigger picture. For those whose family members are being snatched away, as soon as their family members are returned, if that happens, it sounds like they don't care about anybody else who are in the same predicaments. And so I'm kind of like, y'all ain't mad enough. You're not, right? Ain't mad enough at all. And again, people keep trying to put the burden on us to fix all of this. And the people who've literally voted for my oppression are now telling me it's time to come together. And I'm like, you want me to come together with you because now you're on the receiving end of it. And you still aren't making an effort, even within your own community, to get all of them on board to handle it, do everything. So now you want us to put our bodies on the line, but times have changed because cops have qualified immunity, right? Let's talk about William McNeil. If you remember, you saw the clip with the guy who got pulled over and then the cop punched them all in the face and everything. And we just saw that, you know, those cops will be cleared and they won't have to face any charges. That's going to be the reality that's going to be a thing soon. That's just going back to normal. Think of the time period we had between about 2012 and 2016 on this channel when I spent a lot of time covering a lot of the police shootings and how so many police were never charged, or even if they were charged, they were acquitted, and how this is just going back to that. That's what that is, right? And so watching so many all of a sudden keep wanting us to come out here. And I'm not saying don't be active. I'm not saying, don't lock in. But it's like now it's an even more slippery slope, because when we were out there and when we were telling people what was up and the danger that existed, and folks gaslit Black folks. Folks, it's in your head. Well, you should have complied. Even some in the collective was on some BS. Don Lemon, when he started talking about Trayvon Martin, and come on, y'all, pull your pants up. The respectability politics started jumping in and all that, right? And so now that things are a lot more chaotic and police literally have free reign to do whatever they wanted. So just like we talked about with the Katrina doc, where the governor said shoot to kill, and just like how Orange Man the other day said for National Guard, do what you got to do. When it comes to Metropolitan Police, do what you got to do. When we go back to Tulsa, in the Tulsa riots or the Tulsa massacre, and all them white men were deputized, you just needed to be somebody over the age of 12 and white, and you get a gun and go to do what you need to do. It's the same language. Ain't nothing changed. And so now that we're in that space where we definitely will get the target on our forehead and the back of our head and our chest and our back and wherever else, you want us to go back out there and continue to do what we already were doing. Like, the most annoying thing about having this channel is everything that's happening we already been talking about. Like, there's a clip for everything on this channel. When I spent all that time talking about Clarence Thomas and his obsession with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act and why he wants to gut it, and his obsession with gutting Section 2A of the Voting Rights Act, we have at least 4 videos talking about that for the last 3 years. PragerU, like I just said, we have videos talking about that. It's all there, and it's not just me. It's a lot of people who are in this space that have been doing the work. And everybody thought we were crazy or fear-mongering, and here we are. So then when people are like, well, Calvin, what should we do? Hell, I don't know. I've been trying to tell you what was going to happen. We were supposed to get to the space where we didn't have to get here. Now somehow I got to have the solution too. Shit. But anyway, yeah. So now all these people are saying, "Oh, it's time to come together." We were together, but the rest of y'all was playing, and so now it's like, unfortunately for these other communities, y'all gonna have to figure it out, right? We got enough going on at home for us, right? And it's not trying to say that nobody's issue matters, but we now have to really take care of home. And this is why I was saying at the beginning of the video, we really have to lock into community. Because the other thing is, now that things are changing, and as there's all these federal regulations that are changing and there's protections that are disappearing, there are going to be services that Black people collectively have depended on that come from the federal government that may not necessarily have to be implemented anymore. And the question becomes, when those services or those things are gone, what do some of us do? Those of us who depend on certain things, like who's going to be that outlet? All right. Those are things to think about. Anyway, yeah, I don't care about Candace Owens. I did write it down. I know she's being sued by the French president and his wife because Candace has decided to die on the hill that his wife is really a man. And for some reason, again, look, when you're on the grift, you start running out of things to talk about when you're trying to find where your new audience should be. If that's the hill she wants to die on, enjoy. I don't really have much to give her. Call Orange Man to fix it. That's your thing, right? I'm gonna pause and then we'll close the live on some happy things like music, right? And again, we talked about the 300,000 before. As far as the 300,000 Black women that have lost their jobs, understand that is systemic and that is done on purpose, right? They are trying to get things back to how they feel they should be, and so that means get us up out of there, get Black folks up out of there, get Black women up out of there. They don't want Black women in positions of servitude. You know what would be interesting? What I could probably see somebody trying to do? I could see at some point them trying to get Ketanji Jackson off the Supreme Court. I could see that being a thing. You give it a minute. Watch that be something at some point. Since at this point anything goes, right? So let's pause and read some comments and let's end on a happy note, right? I don't want to sit here and just be mad all day. So let me also make sure that I covered everything that's in the title of this video, because sometimes we do that and then I didn't skip something. So let's just see. Calvin Michaels. Let's pop up. Let's look at myself. Jillian Michaels, DC Youth, Prager, Smithsonian, California. Yes, we got everything. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, here we go. Somebody said, that is such a great question, Miss Cruzen. And they said, how do we communicate safely? That's the thing I'm trying to freaking figure out. Because the thing that also works against us is that we're on these platforms that are available to everybody, right? Anybody can watch this channel. So I can never use my channel as a place to organize because everything is out right there. And I get it. We could do Patreons and paid memberships and so on and so forth, but there'll still be people that come in and try to do different things. But I do feel collectively we have to learn to kind of almost speak in code again, which is not a thing anymore, right? I think we have to learn to not broadcast everything right now. As much as I love the stories of like Black folks that are doing certain things or stepping into services that, like, and what I mean by that is, this company's creating a Black-owned resource to do this, or this is a Black-owned shopping center. I love all of that, but I get nervous because when they get too much traction, somebody comes to try to ruin it. Then here comes Edward Bloom, right? Edward Bloom only found out about something like Fearless Fund because he found out about it through social media. And so, he probably found out about it through a few interviews that the people had gone through. So it's like, yeah. I think that's very important. And in the past, our community spaces used to be where our communication was. The churches and the mosques and the schools were our places to gather and organize and map out and give information and share insight. That's not really a thing anymore in this moment. I do feel the church in some spaces is that for some communities, but we're in an era where people are not in church anymore, right? This is not the era of on Sunday, the whole neighborhood's at the church. That's not the reality anymore. Or even the same for the mosque, right? And then even with the schools, it's different, right? So there's a whole lot to think about in that. Let's see. I'm late. What up, Kiana? I'm late. Did he talk about the Katrina doc? It's not in the title. I did talk about it. It's in the very beginning, but I didn't put it in the title because I didn't want folks to get confused between this video and the last in the news. So yeah, once the re-upload comes on, the Katrina conversation is in the, I think it's the first segment we did. Raynette said $25 burns so fast. It certainly does. That 25 will be out of here. You burn through it so quick. $25 now is like lunch, right? Depending on where you go. Somebody said, you're the only one concerned about wrapping it up, Calvin. We can listen to you for hours more. If you did a 10-hour, you will have many of us here with you the entire time. Thank you for that. But I actually am traveling and I have somewhere to be in the morning, so I got to get up early. And I'm trying to, just not give you like what I call information overload, where it's just like, dang, okay, enough, too much, right? Somebody said, at some point when you are traumatized and abused for centuries, you should say enough is enough. I agree with that aspect, but I think a lot of times too, I'll leave it at that. I'm not even going to combat you on that because I actually agree. Let's see. Somebody said you can't hang out and have fun at the museum. I mean, there's some museums you can have fun at, but a lot of these museums are, they have a different kind of purpose. And sometimes as a teenager, that's not what you want to do anyway. You want to go do some other stuff, right? You want to hang out, want to run the streets, have a good time. That's just what teenagers do, right? Somebody said, Republicans removing voters from the voter rolls before major election. It happens all the time. And my thing is, if your policies are so popular, why do you have to do things like voter disenfranchisement or continue to redistrict or do all these things that, push out the people that you think are going to work against you? If you're popular, if your policy is so popular, you should have nothing to worry about, right? Let's see. Okay, I do want to say like a musical thing. I saw this really cool, this interesting post where somebody was saying like, name like an R&B song that you can't just play once, that you have to start over every time or replay. And so when I was thinking about it, I'm going to quickly tell you my top 4 because I'm shifting over to some happy stuff because I want to go to bed with my blood pressure normal, right? Like I said, I'm not trying to die at 59 from hypertension, so we always have to end these lives on a high note. My 4 songs at the moment were Milestone, I Care About You, or Why Don't You Care For Me? That's that song off the Soul Train soundtrack. Soul Train, Jesus. Soul Food soundtrack. And remember, Milestone was the group that was composed of Babyface, Kevon Edmonds, Melvin Edmonds, Casey, and JoJo. And that is definitely one of the songs that I can never play only once, because once they get to the climax and Kevon Edmonds does his singing, I got to play it a few times. And then normally I got to play the performance of it on the Oprah show. And then I got to play it from Babyface's Unplugged. That's one song, because I did 4 because there was only 4 that you could put in the post. Whitney Houston's Fine, which is a song people always forget about. Fine was that song that was added to her greatest hits compilation that came out in 2000 or 2001. Fine, the second half of that song, when Whitney gets into her Whitney pocket, and it's like a smooth R&B, Lucy Pearl kind of sounding song, a bit different from what she normally does. I always have to play that one a million times. Tevin Campbell, Could You Learn to Love, is a ministry, okay? When you get from that climax, because this is the era of climaxes, right? When he gets into that bridge, from that bridge to the rest of the song, I don't understand how this song was not a bigger hit. And as much as I love Can We Talk, I am tired of hearing it at brunch. I wish that y'all would discover a new Tevin Campbell song, whether it be Alone With You, Goodbye, Could You Learn to Love? Like, there's so many choices. Please, people, tell me what you want me to do. Any of those would be a great substitute for Can We Talk for a minute, right? And then my last choice was Faith Evans, Soon As I Get Home. Those are my 4 at the moment, as far as songs that I have to replay. So I'm anxious to hear what your 4 are for those who like to participate. Let's see here. Somebody said, so she said, before the end of this nightmare, I think the 3 oldest judges will retire and be replaced by the worst judges we can ever witness. It only get worse, and they'll be younger, right? So, yeah. That's all I got. Yeah. Let's see. Somebody said, dun, dun, dun. All right, Troy Body has a great post. I don't want to read it out loud because, again, this goes back to that conversation of in code. But yeah, I agree. We're here. Okay. Let's see. Somebody said, can you take a camera into DC and show us what's going on? I mean, there's nothing to show you. I mean, I'm actually going to be out of town after tomorrow, but I mean, sure, but there's nothing happening, at least right now. I think if there does become an escalation, it will be provoked. Like, they love to paint people that live in certain neighborhoods as violent, and they just step outside and be ready to do something. A lot of times there's some kind of provocation that kicks it off, right? All right. How do I feel about Mariah Carey's new song? The Type Dangerous song is okay. I like the song, the other one, a little bit more. I'm not crazy over either of them, but I do, I always support all of the seasoned acts, whether it's her or Mary or all the ones in that age bracket. I'm always going to support whatever they have either way. Somebody said, you put me in my Tevin Campbell bag. I have to listen to him after this. Tevin has amazing music. His first album is my favorite. I know everybody loves I'm Ready, but that first album of his has Round and Round, and I'm just going by the singles. It has Round and Round, Tell Me What You Want Me to Do, Alone With You, which, again, people sleep on that song. It also has Strawberry Letter, 23, but the good version is the New Jack Swing version, not the dance version that's on streaming platforms. You got to get the New Jack Swing one, right? Just Ask Me To, One Song, Confused, Goodbye, and there's one song that I'm skipping, but that album had 9 singles and all of them slapped, every last one of them. That was an excellent album. Please go back and revisit his first album. Okay. Let's see. Can you talk about how crime is down? So I did on my last video that was just released like 2 days ago. So just go on this channel and dig through and find a video that says like DC federal lockdown, Orange Man, foolery and scare tactics or something like that. And towards the end of the video, I have a whole display of like the crime stats in DC. And there's also a resource and I'll actually just tell you what the resource is. There's a website called, if you look up come on, man, load up. If you look up the show the freaking Verge. Okay, Council on Criminal Justice. If you go to their website, they have an entire interactive tool that you can use on their website that lets you look at the crime statistics for 42 American cities in the United States. And it lets you look up different stats on like homicides, things like, theft, things like sexual assault. And you can also compare multiple cities and look at trends over time. And so it's a great resource, but I talk about that in the video as well. Ooh, wait a minute. Hold on. Inside Heike Life 323 Bossy said, Calvin, did you talk about Crazy Loomer and how she told all of Ms. Lindsey Graham's business in a deposition? I know nothing about it, but now you've given me something to read during my commute tomorrow. So we'll see what that's about. Calvin, did you hear about Miss Gladys Knight? Somebody please inform me on Miss Gladys, because God, I plan to go to the show in October, right? Gavin said, or Piscean Beauty said, you won't ever put me off. Can we talk? Oh no, we still love it. We just have additional options. They make it the only option. I'm tired of hearing it. I just need a break from it, right? Yeah, but it's still a great song. But when you hear it so much, like there's just certain songs I'd be like, give me a break. If it's like a brunch or a party, I don't want to hear Can We Talk? I don't want to hear Candy Rain. I don't want to hear, what else don't I want to hear? Candy Rain, Can We Talk? Poison. And these are all fun songs. You hear them at every function, every event. It's not even exciting to hear them anymore. I'm like, oh, right? Honestly, even if they play Juvenile, back that thing up, I'm like, here we go, Cash Money taking over the 900 2000, yay. Blow the whistle, yay, so much fun. Like, dang, man, how you got, okay. But yeah, there's that. And it's not against the songs, it's just you hear them so much. I'm like, okay. And maybe it's because I'm getting older and I've been outside for like 18 years. You still partying. Like, okay, you remember Tiffany Evans, the girl that had the song Promise Ring? She has this song on her debut album called Girl Going Wild. And there's this line where she's like, the song is about, it's very innocent. It's like, because I think when her album came out, she was probably like 15 or something. But the song is about her critiquing another peer of hers that's just being a little too grown or something like that. And so the line says this part about like, because your mama's 34 and she still be up in the club. And so I just happened to be like playing some music and the song just happened to come on and I heard, wait a minute, damn. Excuse me? Sheesh. Well, God, just aging us up. We supposed to just be in the house in the moment with this age now. Jeez, Tiffany. Man. What are some good songs to feel hopeful in these times? Right now, my favorite song is Sounds of Blackness, I'm Going All the Way. I think it's a great, just feel good. It just always makes you feel good. It has a great climax. And of course, Ed Nesby's gonna do her singing on it. I love that song. It's on my gym playlist too. So it's one of my favorites. Okay, they said this is about Gladys. The husband is basically trying to pull what's happening to Wendy Williams on Miss Gladys Knight. Allegedly, she has dementia. If you've seen the show, then you know it's likely true. He's working her like let me see. Wow. Okay. Can I say something here? I love Gladys, and she's one of my favorites. You know, she's my absolute favorite alto, right? I want to get my mama tickets to the Four Legends tour, and then I want to go to. I was at an event in 2023. Gladys Knight was there, and something was very off. And me and the people that were at this event all kept talking about it. And yeah, I don't like to stir and mix things up or like be messy. I'll just say something was not there. And I think with age too, you know, people just move a little bit different. They're a little bit more delayed. And this was like a gala, like, you know, everybody's in tuxes and eating and stuff like that. And even where she was at. Now, I do understand there's also like protecting her because like nobody could go to her table, like because everybody wanted to get pictures and stuff, which, you know, celebrities don't want to deal with that. But like they would not let anybody near. And the way that it was done, to be fair, COVID is still a thing, right? And when they're having these events and stuff, and you don't know what people have, and this was in New York of all places, where you 8 million people just in the city alone, right? And so it could have also just been a thing where, like, with as far as the protection and no pictures, and when I say perimeter, like, it wasn't even like she's right here and people say, no, it's like she's way over there and you can't even get anywhere in that vicinity. And so I understand with somebody of her age and stuff, you don't want her like catching different things. So maybe that's what that was. But when she went to that podium and spoke, it was kind of like her talking points were a little scattered. And to be fair, I'm very scattered on this channel, if you haven't noticed. Well, I'll be talking about something and then jump into this and then jump into that and jump into this. But the kind of scattered that I saw was just a little off. And maybe it was just an off day. I don't want to say that she has anything, but that's just what I noticed. And she seemed very different from when I saw her just a few years earlier. But she's one of my favorite people in the world. So hopefully she's good. We'll see what happens. I don't want to contribute to any kind of gossip, but I did notice something was off when I saw her. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I did see that. The actress that plays Dee from What's Happening. Yeah, rest in peace to her. Okay. Somebody said Boeing just lost 40,000 jobs. Amazon has lost 17,000 jobs moving to Brazil. I mean, that's going to continue to be a thing. Boeing has really just had a really bad few years anyway. Boeing has been getting bad ever since those two Ethiopian flights crashed, right? So you had that going on, and the grounding of different flights and the investigations and the conversations around whistleblowers. I think you're going to see a lot of things happening. And as AI continues to expand and get larger, as much as I hate AI, it's here, ain't nothing we can do about it. So you got to figure out how to work around it. But like, there's going to be a lot of things that just change, right? And I think we're at the tip of the iceberg. We ain't even seen it get to where it's going to go. That's the scary part. Let's see. Yeah, I know Gladys is a part of that group as well, because but who knows? Hopefully she's good though. And can I be honest too? As much as I want to, as happy as I am to go and see this show, this is the tour that she's on. It's her, Patti LaBelle, Shaka, and Stephanie Mills. Something internally just, for me, does not feel right about these entertainers still touring when they're 81. And I know some people love it. Some of them, as an artist, you just always have it, because Patti said she's going to tour until she goes to glory. It's just something she loves. And I hope that's why they're all doing it. But I just feel like at this age, this is when you're supposed to just bask in the greatness of what it is that you've contributed and just live your best days, as opposed to going on the road and bust this and tour bust that and hot stages and running around. But if that's what they're enjoying it, fine. I just hope it's not a situation where it's something that they have to do, because then it doesn't feel right. But yeah, I hope they're good. Yeah, I mean, I've seen all four of them. Well, I have not seen Stephanie Mills in concert before, but I've seen the other three at some point. Like I went to a Shaka Khan concert. It was an amazing time. Shaka was amazing, awesome. She was having a good day. She was in good voice, great show. I took my godmom to see Gladys Knight in 2019 with the OJs. Excellent, 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 both acts, right? This is right before Eddie Levert, because now he's in like a wheelchair performing, but this is when Eddie Levert could still like kind of be mobile and dance and stuff. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Patti LaBelle I've seen a few times at events, especially when I was doing a lot of seat filler work. She was always a part of somebody's tribute at these award shows. So I've seen Patti like 3 or 4 times, but I've never seen Stephanie Mills in concert. So that's like, that looks fun. But okay, I feel like we've done a lot tonight and covered a lot, and I still need to put the timestamps in for the people who are going to watch the replay. Let's see. Music of Life said, unfortunately, these Black artists have to tour. Some 20-year-old white girl is currently chilling on the bench because their grandfather stole Sam Cooke's catalog. LOL, dirty game. And it is true. There's so many that are. Now, I personally don't feel that a Patti or a Gladys or a Shaka or a Stephanie have to keep touring. I feel like they've kind of been blessed in a space where their finances are okay. But I do feel that there are many others who've come out of these great eras who, yeah, they have to tour for the rest of their life because they never were paid what they should have been properly paid years ago during their heyday and during their prime, when they were selling the million records and going gold and getting the hits and winning this and that and the third, but they were getting pennies in royalties, right? I just always think of like how Jackie Wilson died with no money, and who's the one that sings My Guy? Mary Wells died with no money, right? Literally in a 1-bedroom apartment and had no money, right? Like stuff like that breaks my heart to hear. And yeah, that's the sad aspect of the industry. And so, man, that's that. But anyway, this has been a great live. I appreciate y'all for hanging with me. I will see you guys next week at some point. And yeah, we're just going to keep it going. I'm really trying to kind of increase the volume of pre-made content just to kind of put more stuff out there. But yeah, when y'all don't see me, it's because I'm taking some time for me, right? Like, let me have that time. Like in the same way I got to sit and saturate in all this terrible stuff, I also have to, whatchamacallit, make sure that I'm good, because I'm not about to lose my mind in this chaotic world. Like, I refuse. I got too much stuff going for me. So anyway, this has been dope. Like I said, book club, I'll put the selections out at the very, very end of the month for you guys to vote on. Comedically Hard-Headed podcast episode will come out next week. What else did I say in that live? We talking about the live. I think I covered everything. Anyway, oh yeah, check out my albums when you get a chance. I'm gonna actually start promoting them soon. I know it's almost been a year, and them albums are just sitting there. I'm like, yeah, check them out when you get a chance. But yeah, so don't start getting annoyed when you start seeing my songs appear at the end of these videos again. For those of you who don't like my music, too bad. Don't care. Anyway, I'm out. Stay safe. Stay sane. Mind your business so that you can age well. And I'll see you on the next live or the next pre-made video or the next podcast or the book club or whatever else I'm tied to. And make sure to check out the website, calvinmichaels.com, in the event that I ever disappear from YouTube. All right, guys. See you later. Good night.